Chapter 176. Zhu Rong was served in Ice Castle's local delicacy, but the whole meal was almost carried out in silence. Other than the melodious music, there was no other sound. The Nether King did not ask Zhu Rong any more questions. It was as if he had spoken too much and was immersed in the food. The two of them ate for about 10 minutes before Zhu Rong put down his knife and fork. The Nether King looked up at him. "Is it not to your taste?" "No, it's very delicious," Zhu Rong said seriously. "But I ate before I came." The Nether King nodded and ate a few more mouthfuls before putting down his knife and fork. He snapped his fingers, and two maids walked in and started to clear the table. The Nether King looked at Zhu Rong's reserved expression and smiled. "Then let's do some exercise after dinner." "Exercise after dinner?" Zhu Rong was confused. "Yes." The Nether King nodded. Mammon and Yulia from the League of Stars should have arrived. Due to Li Anping's death, the Xia Dragonfinch has been eliminated. Next, it will be our battle with the League of Stars. Although the Heavenly Queen has reached the 6th energy level, she might not be a match for me in a one-on-one battle. The Nether King's words revealed his strong confidence. An aura that was as strong as the mountains, the sea, and hell emerged from his body. However, Mammon and Yulia will not think this way. So, let's give them a warning. Zhu Rong did not understand what the Nether King meant. However, he felt a shocking wave of psychic energy emerging from the Nether King's body. The next moment, the psychic energy was like a radar. Once it was retracted, it instantly scanned the entire area within a 5-kilometer radius. Hee, there are indeed many bugs spying on us. The Nether King smiled and finished the red wine in his glass. There are a total of 56 people who are not from our side. Clean them up as an exercise after dinner. Zhu Rong stood up and cupped his hands. "Yes, sir." On a building 1 kilometer away, Li Qian was looking at the palace with a pair of military binoculars. Roland, who was at the side, paced back and forth uneasily. He said to Li Qian, "All right, this is the last place. Let's leave after we're done." "Wait a minute." Li Qian looked through the binoculars at all the places in the palace that she could see. "There are still a few places left. Let me take a look. Be careful. If you see them, don't look into their eyes. Many experts have very strong intuition. Even if you look at their eyes, you may be discovered." "I know. You said it 10 times. Li Qian said unhappily. "We are a full kilometer away from them. There are so many people in the city. It would be strange if they could discover us. Anyway, be careful. If they find out," before Roland could finish his words, he heard Li Qian exclaim, "What happened?" "I found Zhu Rong." Li Qian stared at the binoculars. Behind a floor-to-ceiling glass window, Zhu Rong was eating with a black-haired man. As a member of the Xia Dragonfinch, Li Qian had naturally seen Zhu Rong's information. However, the Pluto was too mysterious. None of the people in the Xia Dragonfinch had seen his picture before. Zhu Rong. Roland's heart tightened when he heard this name. Facing this expert who had betrayed them, a complicated feeling welled up in his heart. Who's the man eating with him? He seems to be of a higher status than Zhu Rong. Li Qian said while observing Zhu Rong and the Pluto through the binoculars. However, she didn't dare to look directly into their eyes or even their faces. She only looked at them from the side. After staying in the Xia Dragonfinch for so long, she knew that experts like Zhu Rong had experienced countless life-and-death battles. Their intuition and senses were very strong. Any small provocation could attract their attention. Even so, when she glanced at the Pluto through the binoculars, she still had a strange feeling. He seemed to have glanced at me, Li Qian said with some doubts. Was it my illusion? What? Roland suddenly became nervous. Whether it was your imagination or not, it's too dangerous. Let's go quickly. Wait, they seem to be doing something. Li Qian saw Zhu Rong put down his knife and fork. Then, the Pluto put down his knife and fork as well. Then, the two of them exchanged a few words. In the next moment, an astonishing aura soared into the sky. An aura that was like the sigh of hell and the decay of the underworld gushed out. Death and fear. All the ability users within a 5-kilometer radius felt a suffocating aura. At this moment, it was as if hell had descended upon the human world. What they didn't know was that the Pluto released his psychic energy through the underworld. That was why they felt this way. However, at this moment, they all knew one thing. Who is it? What a terrifying psychic energy. We've been discovered. Let's go. It's a level 5 ability user. This feeling, it must be the Pluto. Run. Li Qian slowly put down the binoculars. She opened her mouth and moved. In the end, she said bitterly, "Is it the Pluto? I don't know." Roland swallowed his saliva. He looked at the palace in the distance with a nervous expression. It was as if it was the entrance to hell. This level of aura has surpassed all the level 5 ability users I've seen. Let's go. We have to leave this place immediately. Run. After saying that, Roland pulled Li Qian and hurriedly ran toward the stairs. However, just as everyone was running away, a flame soared into the sky. It almost lit up the entire night sky. Some of the ability users who were running away looked at the sky stupidly. Some ran even faster. Some hid. Li Qian and Roland looked back and ran even faster. A sense of deadly threat was coming from the sky in an unending stream. It's Zhurong. What does he want to do? Does he want to kill us all? The next moment, the god of fire in the sky gave the answer with his actions. A stream of psychic energy gushed out of his body and turned into a straight line. It swept through a 3-kilometer radius in a clockwise direction. Then, 56 flames emerged from Zhurong's body and flew in all directions. Although he didn't use his full strength, the temperature of the flames had exceeded 3,000 degrees Celsius. Wherever it passed, there was no sign of burning. Everything was turned into ashes in an instant. Even the snow on the ground began to melt in large patches. Half of the citizens of Morocco felt that the weather seemed to have warmed up. However, those ability users who were targeted by the flames definitely didn't think so. It was a nightmarish attack. Psychic energy, ability, buildings, armor, and the ground couldn't withstand it. The flames penetrated all obstacles. Wherever it passed, only ashes were left. They could only watch the flames turn people into ashes one after another. After the flames killed the target, they disappeared in an instant. There was no extra damage cost. It showed Zhurong's supreme control. Roland and Li Qian rushed down the stairs as if their lives depended on it. The temperature on the roof continued to rise, and the terrifying light illuminated their backs. At this moment, Li Qian was completely dominated by fear. In the face of Pluto's attack, Li Qian and the others had no way to resist at all. Suddenly, she thought of Lianping. Sadness, sorrow, and happiness. At this moment before her death, she felt all kinds of emotions surge into her heart. Scenes of memories related to Lianping appeared in front of her eyes. Just like the moment before her death, her short life flashed through her mind like a passing lantern. Maybe this is good. Li Qian turned around and looked at the corridor that was completely illuminated. It was as if it was daytime. She stood still. The next moment, 2 flames melted the wall and shot directly toward Roland and Li Qian in the corridor. The amazing heat directly curled their hair. Before the flames even got close, Li Qian and Roland's skin had already been burned. Facing the attack of death, Li Qian closed her eyes, quietly waiting for the final moment to come. However, the imagined death didn't come. Li Qian couldn't help but open her eyes. She saw a slender figure in front of her, directly taking the attack of the 2 flames. The red flames surrounded Roland's whole body. Fire snakes came out of her eyes, mouth, and ears. However, a colorful stream of psychic power still blocked in front of Li Qian. She opened her mouth and kept waving her hands, as if she wanted to say something to Li Qian and ask her to leave quickly. However, her vocal cords were burned, so she couldn't say a complete sentence. Li Qian's eyes widened, staring at Roland, who had fallen into the sea of fire. She opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but the next second, the flames disappeared in the air. And the beauty with long purple hair had also turned into ashes in front of Li Qian. Li Qian sat on the ground and stared at the black scorch mark on the ground. She reached out her trembling hands and finally couldn't help but cry bitterly. The heart-wrenching cry resounded through the entire building. In the air, Zhurong felt his flames disappear one by one. Suddenly, His eyes moved slightly, and he looked into the distance with some surprise. After a moment, he sneered. "Since you have such courage, I'll fulfill your wish." Then, the flames on Zhu Rong's body disappeared, and he fell toward the palace below. At the same time, on the other side of Marok, a blue-haired, hunchbacked old man was standing on the top of a building, looking at Zhu Rong's location indifferently. The bright light was gradually dimming, returning the night to Marok. When Zhu Rong's light completely disappeared, the old man said, "Zhu Rong, this kid, he's stronger than when he was in Xia Dragonfinch." "Humph, I only need one bullet to get rid of him." A pink-haired woman stood behind the old man and said with an unconvinced face. She looked to be in her late 20s, with a plump and graceful figure. Wearing leather boots and a leather jacket, she gave off the feeling of a naked young girl. "Yulia, your ability somewhat restrains Zhu Rong. Of course, it's not difficult to get rid of him, but it won't be so easy for me." Hearing the woman's disdainful voice, the old man didn't take it seriously and continued. "But the spirit of Pluto, did you feel it?" When the woman named Yulia heard the two words Pluto, her previous disdainful expression disappeared, and she nodded solemnly. "This guy is very strong." The old man nodded. "From the looks of it, Pluto is probably the strongest person in the Eastern continent. Under the situation where we don't know his ability, we shouldn't arbitrarily start a conflict with him. We also need to adjust the plan for the next meeting. Yes, I'll talk to the leader. With the current situation, we shouldn't be enemies with Pluto." That night, 55 ability users died under Zhu Rong's attack. But what was even more terrifying was that Pluto, who had only revealed a corner of his ability before Zhu Rong, attracted everyone's attention with his unfathomable spirit. Pluto, the strongest and most mysterious level 5 ability user in the Fire Dragon Vanguard, once again attracted everyone's attention with his domineering dominance. The Xia Dragonfinch, who was originally able to compete with the Fire Dragon Vanguard, was no longer cared about. In everyone's eyes, the current Xia Dragonfinch was just a pile of chips for Xia, a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Chapter 177. In the underworld, the red moonlight was still shining on the ground. In the air, a black figure kept falling. After a few seconds, it suddenly appeared a few hundred meters away. After falling for a few seconds, it flashed again and appeared a few hundred meters away. Like a black it kept jumping towards the north. It was Emma, who kept moving forward through the spatial gate. On her back, she was carrying the unconsciously Onping. Emma's frown deepened as she looked at the wreckage beneath her feet and the zombies everywhere. This was already the 12th hour of her search for the living dead. Without rest and sleep for a long time, her eyes were bloodshot. Her hair was greasy and withered, and she looked very haggard. But now, she really had no other choice. At this moment, the Underworld King had attacked with all his strength. All the revival points were surrounded, and there were 3 level 5 ability users waiting for an opportunity. Only now did she realize how naive the resistance was. In the underworld, they were no match for the Underworld King. Emma's only hope now was the man on her back. She didn't even dare to imagine what would happen to her and her subordinates if this man didn't know how to defeat the Underworld King. A few minutes later, Emma appeared in a cave. Looking at the remains of a bonfire, the ground still had some warmth. Someone was here just now. They shouldn't have left for too long. Just as Emma touched ashes and was in deep thought, she suddenly heard a few footsteps outside. "Who is it?" Emma shouted. A teleportation gate flashed in front of her. After a few flashes, she was already outside the cave. She frowned and looked at the forest outside the cave. But other than a few fallen leaves, there was nothing. Thinking for a bit, she suddenly shouted, "Is anyone here? I am Emma, the leader of the resistance. I want to see your leader. We need your help." Emma shouted a few times. Her voice spread far and wide. She stood there for a few minutes, but no one responded. Just as she was about to shout again, a voice suddenly came from below her. "Stop shouting. Are you trying to lure the zombies here?" Emma took a step back in surprise and found a human face talking at her feet. Seeing Emma's surprised expression, the human face laughed in disdain and slowly rose from the ground. "What are you making a fuss about? My ability is to drill into the ground. Isn't it normal for me to drill into the ground?" Burrower stood in front of Emma. He was naked except for a pair of swimming trunks. He looked like he was swimming in the ground. He patted the dirt off his body, glanced at Emma, and asked, "You want to see which?" "Yes." Emma nodded. She knew that most of the living dead had powerful escape abilities. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to survive for so long. She pointed at Liamping on her back and said, "He might know the secret of the Netherworld King, or even how to leave the Netherworld. I need the witch to wake him up." "Oh." Burrower's eyes narrowed at Emma's words. He glanced at the unconscious Liamping and said, "You said you're the leader of the resistance, Emma. But I've never seen what Emma looks like." Halfway through his words, Emma waved her right hand, and a black portal appeared in front of him. She stepped into it and appeared 10 meters away. "I'm probably the only one in the entire Netherworld who has this ability." Burrower nodded. "Understood. Boss Emma, please come with me. I don't know what's gotten into the zombies lately, but they've been attacking us everywhere. The witch and the elders have all gone underground to hide." Emma followed Burrower to the cave from before. Burrower moved away a few rocks in the deepest part of the cave. Then they saw a passage leading down. Emma thought, "No wonder, so they've all hidden underground. There must be many people like this man who's good at creating underground spaces. But although it's hard to find them, once they're discovered, the zombies will easily block the way. I wonder how many escape routes they have." While Emma was thinking, Burrower's voice came from the passage. "Boss Emma, come down quickly. This passage is very long." Emma took a deep breath and slowly walked underground with Liamping on her back. A few seconds later, a pair of hands reached out from the passage and put the rocks back. Once again, the cave became empty and quiet. However, half an hour later, a large number of footsteps suddenly came from outside the cave. After Emma entered the passage, she found that it was short and winding. Although there were torches at intervals, it was still very dim. She had no choice but to follow Burrowing Man and keep moving forward. The underground passage extended in all directions. Many people had dug underground iron caves on both sides of the passage and lived in them. Along the way, Emma also saw many other living dead. Some of them had withered faces and were just sitting there without moving. Some were crying and making a scene as if they had gone crazy. Some were singing and dancing together, as if this place was not the underworld. Burrower sighed in front. At first, everyone was very optimistic, thinking that they could build a paradise in the underworld. But now we know that we were too naive. This place will never become a paradise or Shambhala. This is hell on earth. It's a cage that binds us. We're just deceiving ourselves. Emma sighed. She wanted to comfort him, but did not know where to start. In the end, she said softly, "It'll get better. After we know the secret of the underworld, we'll escape." Burrower did not say anything and just led the way. Half an hour later, a small wooden house appeared in front of Emma. Burrower gestured for her to go in and did not say anything else. Emma looked at him, licked her lips, and carried Liamping to the house. It was finally time to reveal the mystery. Once the man on her back woke up, she would know the answer. All kinds of thoughts flashed through Emma's mind. Finally, she reached the door and pushed it open. There was a roaring fire, a stone bed, and a rocking chair made of wood. The whole room was simple to the extreme. When Emma pushed open the door, a short old woman sat motionless on a rocking chair, looking coldly at Emma, who had just entered. Looking at the old woman on the rocking chair, Emma said seriously, "Which is it?" "I'm the leader of the resistance, Emma. The man on my back might know the secret of how to fight against the Underworld King. I need you to wake him up." Which was still sitting on the rocking chair, without moving, not saying anything. Only the crackling of the fire and the creaking of the rocking chair could be heard in the wooden house. Just when Emma thought that there was something wrong with Witch, she nodded and shouted at the people outside the door, "You can go out. I can't sense any malice from her." Then, Emma sensed dozens of psychic energies of different strengths quietly leaving the wooden house. Originally, as a level 5 ability user, she had already sensed this, but with her strength, she couldn't care less about these ambushes. which pointed at the stone bed and said, "Put him on the bed. I'll try my best. The conditions of the underworld are too harsh. My body is also deteriorating, and I don't have much time left. I only have about 50% of my original power left. I can't guarantee success. You must succeed." Emma put Li Onping on the bed and looked at Witch, saying, "You must succeed. The Underworld King outside has already begun to use all of his power to eliminate all those who haven't fused. If we also fail, we might not have another chance." "Huh," Witch sighed deeply. "Next, I will use my ability to enter his consciousness and try to wake him up. During this time, you must protect my body well. If my body is harmed in any way or disturbed, the dream will fail. Don't worry. Even if I die, I won't let anyone harm you." Witch nodded. A level 5 ability user was enough to protect her. This was also the reason why she dismissed everyone just now. Then, she closed her eyes and completely laid down on the rocking chair. She looked like she was sleeping, but Emma could clearly sense a psychic energy slowly reaching out from her brain and connecting with Li Onping's brain. Emma didn't have any psychic abilities, so although she was extremely anxious, she could only wait here. About 10 minutes later, a series of battle cries suddenly came from afar. Emma hurriedly pushed open the door and walked outside. She could hear the sounds of battle cries coming from the tunnel in the distance. She became even more anxious, but there was nothing she could do. She had to protect Witch. At this time, Burrower came out from the ground in front of the wooden house. "The zombies have surrounded us. They've blocked all the entrances. Boss Emma, hurry up and take Witch away." Chapter 178. Witch felt her consciousness being connected to Li Onping's mental world. When she opened her eyes, a boundless space appeared in front of her. This is... The wails of dead souls could be heard everywhere. Boundless fear and evil filled Witch's eyes, which felt as if she had come to hell. The environment here is worse than the underworld. Witch frowned. The other party's mental world was complex and vast, far beyond her imagination. She felt as if she had broken into another world. It's too big. It's like a mental space formed by countless souls. Mental attacks have no effect on this person. Even if I try my best, I can't hurt him in the mental world. Then why did he fall into a coma? Witch thought of this and flew into the depths of Li Onping's mental world under the control of her consciousness. Along the way, she saw countless twisted souls and the dead elephants in front of them. The deeper she went, the more frightened she became. All the cruelest and cruelest scenes in the world were as common as eating and drinking here. Witch became more and more worried about the success or failure of her mission. In the mental world, time was difficult to calculate. When Witch felt that she was getting deeper and deeper into the other party's mental world, the dead souls around her began to decrease. After an unknown amount of time, perhaps a second, perhaps 10,000 years, when Witch finally reacted, there were no more undead in front of her. In the empty mental world, black and white became the main colors. The two colors spread and intertwined, turning one side white and the other black. They represented the confrontation between Li Onping and Black's consciousness. At the same time, a furious roar was heard. "Li Onping, your strength was given to you by me. Do you really think you can defeat me?" Witch heard the voice and turned around. She saw two figures entangled with each other. Fists and feet collided, and the sound of flesh tearing could be heard. With a thought, Witch flew toward the two figures. She saw a black demon-like creature attacking a man. The man looked exactly the same as the man sleeping on the stone bed. Seeing this, how could Witch, who had a wealth of consciousness battle experience, not understand what was going on in front of her? Is it because that demon-like creature is attacking his consciousness that he can't wake up? Fine, I'll deal with that devil with him first and wake him up. Let's see if he really knows the secret of the Nether King. With that in mind, Witch let out a loud roar, and a white bolt of lightning formed from her spiritual energy shot towards Black. This was a unique technique that she had learned over the years of walking in other people's consciousness, attacking others through the fragments of their consciousness. Because a person cannot focus 24 hours a day. What are we eating today? I wonder if he likes me. Is there something wrong with my outfit today? The comic has finally been updated tonight. As long as a person was still alive, they would definitely have all kinds of fragmented thoughts. These thoughts might have just flashed by, and the master himself might not have taken them to heart. Witch, on the other hand, was able to borrow these fragments of consciousness in the minds of ordinary people and combine them with her own spiritual power to unleash powerful spiritual lightning. The white lightning struck Black's back in an instant, emitting waves of black smoke. Black screamed and turned its head to look at the witch. "Get out of the way," Lianping shouted. However, before Witch could react, she felt an extremely evil and ferocious aura rushing towards her. This aura was so strong that an ordinary person would have a mental breakdown if they were to face it for a second. The more fragile ones would turn into a lunatic just by looking at it. Just as Witch was stunned, a black shadow flashed, and Black was already in front of her, grabbing her neck. "Go to hell." The terrifying strength crushed Witch's neck. At this time, Lianping arrived behind Black and punched at the back of Black's waist. With a bang, Black turned around and caught Lianping's fist. He chuckled and said, "Are you still not going to give up? You're already so weak. The outcome has been decided. You won't be able to hurt me in the next battle." Lianping clenched his teeth and looked at Black. A huge force came from Black's fist, making it impossible for him to break free. At this time, rays of light shot out from Black's back, and an old voice sounded. "Unfamiliar young man, this is a strike that I'm putting my life on the line. After this strike, my consciousness will disappear forever, and I will die completely. I hope that after you wake up, you can bring everyone out of the underworld." Along with the voice of the old man, endless light illuminated the entire space. Be it Black or Lianping, both of their eyes were shrouded by the white light. Emma heard Burrower's words and frowned. "How is this possible? They know all your entrances and exits?" "All of them." Burrower gritted his teeth and said, "Someone must have betrayed us. Now all the entrances and exits are blocked by endless zombies. Unless you have special abilities, you won't be able to get out." He looked at Emma and begged, "Boss Emma, please take Witch out quickly. If possible, there are still some children over there. Can you take them with you?" Emma opened her mouth and sighed. "No, Witch is using her ability now. I can't take her away. Not only that, I have to stay here to protect her." "Damn it," Burrower said with hatred. Of all times, just as the two of them were at their wits' end, and the battle cries in the distance were getting closer and closer, a spluttering sound came from the wooden house, followed by the sound of someone falling to the ground. Emma and Burrower quickly ran in and saw a big mouthful of blood on the ground. Witch had fallen from the rocking chair and was lying on the ground. Burrower hurriedly rushed over and helped Witch up, but when he saw Witch's face, he was shocked again. Witch, who was already senile, was now even older. Her skin was full of wrinkles and wrinkles like tree bark. Her hair was completely white, without a trace of impurity. The most frightening thing was that Witch's eyes, nose, mouth, and ears were all bleeding at the same time. However, Witch's psychic force was still connected to Lianping's brain. "What's wrong? Did Witch fail?" Emma asked anxiously. "I don't know." Burrower's face was full of panic. "I've never seen Witch like this." Suddenly, the battle cries came closer and closer, as if they were right in front of them. The zombies had already arrived. Emma's eyes were filled with determination. She looked at Burrower and said, "You protect them. I'll go out and stop the zombies." With that, she rushed out. A few hundred meters away from the wooden house's passage, there was already a dense crowd of zombies. They were scrambling to get to the wooden house. Emma snorted coldly. A black spatial door appeared in the passage. The spatial door kept expanding and rising, and in the blink of an eye, it had blocked the entire passage. At the same time, another black spatial door appeared horizontally above the zombies' heads. As a result, all of the zombies charging towards the wooden house could only rush into the vertical spatial door and then fall out of the horizontal one. This cycle repeated itself. Not a single zombie was able to get half a step closer to the wooden house. Just as Emma was about to let out a sigh of relief, a loud noise came from above her head. A large cloud of yellow sand drilled out from the top of the cave and turned into a giant drill that spun nonstop in midair, heading straight for Emma's head. At the critical moment, Emma waved her hand. A black spatial door appeared in front of her. The yellow sand drill rushed into the spatial door, and then through the horizontal portal, it directly appeared above the zombies' heads. In an instant, blood and flesh flew everywhere. Several dozen zombies were instantly dismembered. However, Emma couldn't relax at all. This was because the attack just now had come from Sandstorm, who was also a level 5 ability user. Following that, more and more sand drilled out from the top of the passage. They turned into all kinds of weapons and attacked Emma. However, Emma relied on her nimbleness and the occasional teleportation door to avert the danger. However, as time passed, more and more sand appeared in the passage. It was clear that after Sandstorm discovered Emma, it was continuously moving sand towards her. However, Emma had to defend the wooden house to the death. She also had to maintain the 2 spatial doors to stop the zombies. As more and more sand appeared in the space, Emma's injuries also increased. In addition to the exhaustion from the past few days, even the 2 spatial doors blocking the zombies were becoming more and more unstable. Emma could only temporarily withdraw the 2 spatial doors blocking the zombies from time to time, using them to block Sandstorm's attacks. However, this way, the zombies were getting closer and closer to the wooden house. Emma could take a detour, and the space she had to dodge became smaller and smaller. Just as the situation was becoming more and more dangerous, Emma suddenly heard a cry from the wooden house. Her heart tightened. Ignoring the sand and zombies in front of her, she directly opened a teleportation door and appeared in front of the door. Pushing the door open, she saw Burrower hugging Witch, whose face was covered in blood, crying like a child. "Witch, she's dead." While Emma was stunned, a sand spear directly pierced through her shoulder. She cried out in pain and shattered the spear with her palm. Then, she activated her ability again. 3 black spatial doors appeared below Emma, Burrower, and Leonping, who was lying on the bed. The 3 of them directly fell into them and disappeared. Chapter 179. Under the Blood Moon. A black portal suddenly appeared in a valley. A few people fell out of it and landed on the ground. Emma adjusted her posture in midair, but the moment she came out of the portal, she felt something was wrong. She was highly focused, and time seemed to slow down. She saw the unconscious Leonping still falling to the ground. Burrower Guy hugged Witch tightly and fell to the ground as well. Just as the 3 of them were falling to the ground, a black shadow rushed towards Emma at an astonishing speed. Poochie! Emma's right leg flew into the air, and blood spurted out like a fountain. It didn't even take a second to come out of the portal. The shadow rushed forward and cut off one of Emma's calves. A few seconds later, Emma felt a sharp pain in her head. She lay on the ground and stared at the shadow. Flying General, Burrower Guy, seemed to have realized they were being attacked. He stood in front of Emma and said anxiously, "Boss Emma, are you okay?" He turned around and yelled at the man in front of him, "You bastard. It's useless. He's already turned into a zombie and lost his self-awareness. Be careful." He was the Xia's level 5 ability user, the Flying General. Emma frowned and endured the sharp pain in her lower body. "Help me up." Burrower Guy quickly helped Emma up. At the same time, he was on guard against the Flying General. Level 5 ability user. No wonder he could successfully ambush Emma. The pale Flying General watched Emma slowly stand up with Burrower Guy's help. His lips curled into a mocking smile. "To be honest, I admire you. Fei Jiang, don't tell me you're still." Emma was halfway through her sentence when she suddenly shook her head. "No, you're Pluto? You can control their words?" "Yes, I'm talking to you now." The Flying General nodded. Even a level 5 ability user would give up hope after entering the underworld. In the end, they would be slowly absorbed by the underworld because this is indeed an environment that makes people despair. But you've been fighting from the beginning to the end. You have no intention of giving up. You even united a group of subordinates. To be honest, if it weren't for Lianping's appearance, I would have continued to watch and see how long you could last. So you didn't really make a move? Didn't try to kill me like you did recently? Emma looked at Lianping on the ground and suddenly asked, Lianping, that's his name, right? Since it's already reached this point, can you tell me why you're trying to kill the resistance because of this man's appearance? Because Lianping's strength is not bad. Although he can't compare to me, he's still a level 5 ability user. 2 guys with 5th rank power. Even if you work together, you still won't be able to defeat me. Even if you can't defeat me, I'm not someone who likes to take risks. After saying this, the flying general snapped his fingers, and faint human figures began to appear around them. Countless pale zombies appeared in front of Emma and Earthburner's eyes. They were densely packed and endless, with no end in sight. You still want to open a spatial door to escape? The flying general looked at Emma's serious expression and laughed in disdain. If it wasn't for the fact that I wanted to talk to you, I could have killed you with that attack just now. Why aren't you surprised that I know the location of your teleportation is here? Just say it if you want to, Emma said coldly. The flying general smiled and shook his head. Did you know? As a matter of fact, the entire underworld is under my surveillance. Your so-called hiding places, bases, and strongholds are all under my watch. You arranged for the remaining resistance members to stay in this valley, so I guess that you would teleport here. I didn't think I would be right. Seeing Emma and Earthburner's expressions change drastically, the flying general laughed very happily. Is this game fun? Your so-called resistance, your so-called intelligence, and your plans are all flawed in my eyes. If it wasn't for the fact that I was bored and wanted to play with you, you wouldn't have stood a chance at all. Emma clenched her fists and looked at Flying General, who was laughing so hard that he was swaying back and forth with an ashen face. Her voice was as cold as ice. Hansen and the others, what happened? What did you do to them? Them? They're probably dead. The Flying General shrugged and said calmly, they should all be at the respawn point now. I'll tell you something else for free. Under my control, they're all respawning at the same respawn point. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but I can actually control the number and location of the respawn points. Right now, they're surrounded by countless zombies, sandstorms, and wolf. They're probably being killed one after another and fusing into the underworld. If it wasn't for the fact that controlling so many people at the same time consumes too much of my energy, you wouldn't even have a chance to resist. But it's good this way. You can help me relieve my boredom. The resistance of the underworld's resistance was just a game to the Hades. However, there was a bottom line in the underworld. As long as the resistance exceeded this line, the Hades would clean up the entire underworld. Obviously, Lianping's arrival made the Hades feel that he had reached this line. Looking at the ponytailed girl, clenching her teeth with a face full of hatred, the Flying General became more and more delighted. After all, he had been playing this game for so long. He had been waiting for this opportunity. You still have to die more than 100 times before you completely fuse into the underworld, right? The Flying General laughed maniacally. He couldn't help but lick his lips. Don't worry, we have plenty of time. I'll take good care of you. You can try your best to escape. I'm afraid you'll be the only one left. The underworld is only so big. How far can you run? However, in the next moment, the Flying General frowned. He looked behind Emma. There a man was slowly crawling up from the ground. As he stood up, Lianping said slowly, indeed, the underworld is only so big. How long can you run? Hades. The Flying General looked at him with disdain. Lianping, you couldn't even win against Zhurong and Blood Demon. You were beaten unconscious. Do you think you could defeat me by joining forces with Emma? I only hope that your resistance can provide me with some fun. Lianping, Emma muttered this unfamiliar name. She looked at the man who had finally woken up. Unfortunately, it was meaningless. From the beginning to the end, this man didn't know how to leave the underworld. The so-called Hades was just a precaution. As for a level 4 ability user, even if it was as Hades said, he had the strength of a level 5 ability user, but there was a limit to how strong he could be. No need to join forces. Lianping's gaze fell on the flying general. I can kill you as easily as slaughtering a chicken. Oomph. The flying general just snorted coldly. In the next moment, his expression changed drastically. A fist appeared in front of him as if it had teleported. Pucci! The flying general's head exploded like a watermelon. White and red liquid spilled all over the ground like dye. Lianping pulled back his bloody fist and muttered, "Although your strength is still at level 5, you've lost your self-awareness. Too weak." With a thud, the flying general's body fell straight to the ground. The entire place was silent. 2 hours ago, the streets of Morocco were especially quiet today. Most of the residents had received news that they were on holiday. Fully armed soldiers were everywhere on the streets. Today was the day that Ice Fortress, Dessia, and the League of Stars would meet and gradually sign a truce treaty. For Dessia, it might be a surrender treaty. Under the escort of the army, black cars sent the guests from various countries to the front of St. Paul Palace. This time's peace talks will be held here. In the center of the St. Palace was Morocco's famous architectural attraction, the National Council Hall. In the past few hundred years, countless major events that affected Ice Fortress were decided in this conference hall. Today, this conference hall had been renovated. In the semicircular conference space, there were more than 1,000 seats, and it was equipped with facilities for two-way simultaneous transmission of 16 languages. At this time, VIPs from various countries had already entered the conference hall and sat down. There were several documents on the table in front of the seats. They recorded some of the topics of today's meeting. Li Qian was sitting in her seat and flipping through these documents. After witnessing Roland's death that night, she returned to her room alone. No one else from Dessia Dragonfinch knew what happened that night. But everyone found that Li Qian seemed to be different. Not only did she break through to level 2, but she also became colder than her original lively appearance. No matter who she looked at, her gaze was like an ancient well without ripples. It was as if she changed into a different person overnight. Sitting around Li Qian were other members of Dessia Dragonfinch. They were either playing with their phones, in a daze, or chatting. Only a few, such as Lu Sheng, Yang Guang, and others, were flipping through the documents on the table. But the more they read, the deeper their brows furrowed. The current draft of the peace agreement was completely biased towards Ice Fortress and the League of Stars. Once Dessia signed this agreement, not only would Dessia Dragonfinch fall apart, all the potential aptitude users would be divided between Ice Fortress and the League of Stars. Not only that, the content of this agreement was extremely harsh. Aside from the issue of aptitude users, once it was fully implemented, it was enough to cause Dessia's economy and military to regress by more than 10 years. And all these things would be opened up to the League of Stars and the Ice Fortress. If we really sign this damn thing, then in a few years, Dessia will be completely divided between the League of Stars and the Ice Fortress. Lu Sheng gritted his teeth. But even so, there was nothing he could do. The difference in strength was too great. It could be said that whether it was the League of Stars or the Ice Fortress, as long as they casually sent out a level 5 aptitude user, they would be able to defeat Dessia. Faced with this situation, other than signing the agreement, what else could they do? We're meat on the chopping block. Lu Sheng sighed. I wonder what Wang Chong plans to do. What else can they plan? The 9 royal families have already given up on us. Qin Duo sneered from the side. After he finished speaking, he looked at the other side of the venue. A group of middle-aged men and old men were slowly walking into the venue. It was a group of people from the 9 royal families led by Wang Chong. After entering the venue, they didn't even look at Lu Sheng and sat down according to the seating arrangements. If one were to look down from the podium at the front of the conference hall, they would clearly see that Dessia Dragonfinch, who was on the far left, was surrounded by the other participants. It was as if there was an invisible barrier, and all the seats near Dessia Dragonfinch were empty. At this moment, no one was willing to get close to Dessia Dragonfinch. They were even afraid that some unnecessary closeness would cause a misunderstanding between the Fire Dragon Vanguard and the League of Stars. Dessia Dragonfinch, who had once dominated the eastern continent, was now a lamb waiting to be slaughtered in everyone's eyes. Chapter 180. In the corner of the conference room, two men, one old and one young, were sitting quietly in chairs. The young man looked at the documents on the table and threw them back after a while. He gloated. "Desya Dragonfinch is done for this time, right? Who told them to be so overbearing? That Lianping is really an idiot. He actually went to Morocco and walked right into their trap. If he escaped from Desya alone, he might be able to survive for a while." The old man coughed and said with a serious face, "Don't talk nonsense. Desya Dragonfinch, you don't have to worry about it. I brought you here this time mainly to let you make friends with some powerful people, especially important people from the League of Stars and the Fire Dragon Vanguard." While the old man and young man were talking, a large group of people came into the conference room. They looked arrogant and were all wearing traditional clothes. It's the royal family of the Baiwei country. The leader is the emperor of the Baiwei country, King Qilin. Even he is here. The leader was a middle-aged man with a full beard. He looked very strong, and his muscles were like marble. Even his clothes couldn't cover them. His eyes were full of arrogance. He looked at the people in the conference room like an emperor inspecting the people. Looking at the astonished faces of everyone in the meeting room, as well as the great Xia Dragonfinch hiding in a corner, a contemptuous smile flashed across his lips. However, this smile disappeared as quickly as it came, and no one noticed it. King Qilin said to a young man beside him, Although there are many people in this conference room, they are all useless people. You have to pay attention to 5 people: Pluto, Zhurong, White Short Star, Mammon, and Yulia. These 5 people are the key to this conference. They are also the key to how I will develop in the Baiwei country. I understand. After the royal family of the Baiwei country sat down, a large group of people came in one after another. The leaders of Inshi and Flan, as well as the ability users from the military, the emissaries of Dongyang, the important officials of the ice fortress, and so on. 10 minutes later, there was a commotion outside the door. At the same time, most of the aptitude users in the conference hall couldn't help but look at the door. King Qilin murmured, "2 powerful streams of psyche chi. Are the people from the League of Stars here?" Lu Sheng and Desya Dragonfinch's men also looked in the direction of the door. Yin Bei sneered, "What an arrogant chi." The Qian Duo sighed. "Consider it a demonstration. Let's not make any futile resistance." A moment later, the door was opened again. 2 men and a woman slowly walked in. This time, the League of Stars sent very few people. There were only 3 of them: Mammon, Yulia, and Bromon. Shang Jinhai, who had originally wanted to come, decided to continue training with the League Master after learning that Li Anping had died. Although there were only 3 of them, no one present would look down on them because of their small numbers. 2 level 5 ability users and 2 level 5 ability users who had been through hundreds of battles, famous level 5 ability users, who dared to look down on them. When Mammon and Yulia appeared at the door, all of the aptitude users couldn't help but look at them as if they were the main characters of this conference. Their gazes contained worship, respect, and fear. Mammon and Yulia were already used to these gazes. However, it was Bruman's first time enjoying the gazes of so many important people. Although he knew that these gazes weren't directed at him, he still couldn't help but feel a little smug. Suddenly, he turned his gaze to the Xia Dragonfinch's direction. The viciousness in his eyes was revealed without reservation. This made most of the aptitude users in Xia Dragonfinch feel uneasy. If it wasn't for the presence of Lu Sheng, Yang Wang, Qian Duo, Sun Hao, and several other elders, they would have already found a chance to slip away. When the 3 aptitude users of the League of Stars sat down, the entire conference hall became quiet. All of the seats were basically filled. Some of the people who were still whispering shut their mouths under the inexplicable pressure. Everyone was quietly waiting for the curtain to open. The atmosphere in the conference hall was so heavy that it seemed like it could drip water. After 10 minutes, the door to the conference hall opened again. A group of people filed in. The key figures of the ice fortress had finally arrived. Walking at the front was Pluto, who had black hair and black eyes. He was wearing a white military uniform. Walking beside him was an old man wearing luxurious clothes and a crown on his head. He was the current emperor of the Ice Fortress, Ivan II. He was also the head of one of the 4 aristocratic families in the Ice Fortress. He and Bloodseeker were of the same generation. However, because he was an aptitude user, he looked older, but no one dared to look down on him. This man walked out of the flames of war and ascended the throne step by step with the power of mortals. In some ways, he might be more terrifying than some aptitude users. Walking behind Pluto and Ivan II was Zhu Rong, who had a head of flame-like hair. He was half a step behind them, following closely behind the two. The obedience he showed made countless people secretly shocked. The old man and the young man in the corner were very surprised. The young man asked curiously, "This is Zhu Rong? He was very arrogant in the past. Why is he so obedient today?" The old man sighed, "Alas, this really shows how terrifying Pluto is." For people like Zhu Rong, if it wasn't someone who could absolutely suppress him in terms of strength, he would never be so obedient. Xian Long, you have to observe him carefully. This man will have a great impact on the future development of our One Qi sect. It's even related to our life and death. On the other side, King Qilin stared at Pluto. He whispered, "This man is getting more and more terrifying. Compared to 3 years ago when I saw him, he seems to have become a lot stronger." "Father, then this time the young man on the side asked. "Let's wait and see." With the League of Stars and the Fire Dragon Vanguard taking the lead, the situation this time is irreversible. King Qilin sighed. "You have to carefully observe everything that will happen next. Witness the decline of the Xia Dragonfinch and the rise of Pluto with your own eyes. It will be of great help to your future growth." The young man nodded. Suddenly, he asked hesitantly, "Father, I wonder if you and Pluto are compared. Who is stronger and who is weaker?" King Qilin smiled bitterly. "Although we're both at the 5th energy level, I can at most dominate the southern border. Pluto, on the other hand, is probably the strongest in the eastern continent. He might be the second person to reach the 6th energy level after the leader of the League of Stars. He might even be the symbol of the eastern continent in the future to fight against the countries of the western continent and the League of Stars." The young man was shocked. He didn't expect his father to have such a high opinion of Pluto. It was far beyond his expectations. Ignoring the whispers of the people below, the Netherworld King and his group walked to the front row. Lung Shuang, who was behind Zhu Rong, smiled cruelly at Zhu Rong of the Great Xia Dragonfinch as she walked. This made the faces of Lu Sheng and the others turn even uglier. Pluto, on the other hand, maintained a smile from the beginning to the end. He seemed to be in a good mood. Naturally, the people present didn't know that Pluto was multitasking. He was controlling the zombie army in the underworld to kill the rebels and zombies. He even split a part of his consciousness to control the flying general to humiliate the leader of the rebels, Emma. Therefore, he was in a good mood. However, in the next moment, Pluto's expression changed and he stopped walking. As the focus of everyone's attention, Pluto's abnormal behavior immediately attracted everyone's attention. Just when everyone was feeling strange, Pluto regained his smile and started walking again. However, this smile didn't last long before it disappeared again. Then, Pluto put on a performance of changing his face. First, his face turned green, then pale, and finally his expression changed drastically. His face was filled with fear. This time, everyone couldn't help but ask. Zhu Rong was the first to rush up. "My lord, what's wrong?" Ivan II frowned and asked, "General, are you okay? Do you want to go to the hospital?" The people below also began to whisper, "What's wrong with Pluto? Is he sick?" However, Pluto's expression became worse and worse. Zhu Rong supported him and felt that his arm was trembling. "My lord, how is this possible?" Pluto's body trembled more and more. His eyes were filled with disbelief and fear. "My lord, what did you say?" Zhu Rong asked, puzzled. Quick, quick," the Nether King said intermittently. The people in the surroundings all quietly listened to the words of this absolute powerhouse. "Run." When Pluto finished saying these 2 words, there was a poochie sound. Blood spurted out, and a strong arm broke out from Pluto's chest. Cries of surprise rang out. Pluto looked at this arm in despair and muttered. He rushed out. Everyone looked at Pluto in surprise, not knowing what to do. No one present would have thought that most of them had reached the last moment of their lives. When an unprecedented monster broke out of the cage, everyone's lives were no longer in their own hands. Chapter 181. A few minutes ago, when Li Anping killed the flying general with one punch in the underworld and looked up at the blood moon in the sky, he sensed Pluto's presence. He could hear and feel that a powerful force was being nurtured there. However, before killing Pluto, he still had some things to do. With Witch's help, Li Anping woke up again, but even he didn't know what happened in the end. However, one thing was certain, and that was that the current him had been reborn. First of all, his physical fitness had reached a terrifying strength of 22. 9. Speed 21. 8. And stamina 23. 8. His strength had increased by 3. 1. His speed by 2. 8. And his stamina by 3. 3. Moreover, Li Anping clearly felt that when his strength, speed, and stamina had all exceeded 20, his combat ability had reached a whole new level. In other words, it was a strength of another dimension. Although he was still at the 4th energy level, it was incomparable to when he killed Bloodseeker. The so-called 5th energy level was no longer powerful in his eyes. Li Anping felt that he could crack the earth with a stomp of his foot and tear the sky with a punch. He was not used to the illusion that his power was so strong that it was constantly overflowing from his body. Other than that, Li Anping's black psychic energy incarnation floated behind him. Li Anping felt that he could control this psychic energy incarnation at will. Is this the new change after reaching the 4th energy level? Li Anping retracted the psychic energy incarnation, which disappeared into the air in an instant. I don't have time to study this now. He turned around and appeared in front of Emma and Earthburner as if he had teleported. When I was unconscious, I could sense the outside world, so I know everything. Next, I'll break open the underworld, but if you don't want to leave with a leg missing, you should kill yourself and be reborn. Huh? Emma was stunned. She questioned, You know how to leave the underworld? No, you said break open? That's right. I'm going to completely destroy this place. Li Anping said calmly, You should die first. Protect yourself after you revive. After saying that, he pointed his finger at Emma. This finger was so fast that no one could react in time. Under Earthburner and Emma's shocked gazes, Li Anping's index finger pierced through Emma's forehead. A crack opened at the back of Emma's head, and blood spurted out like a fountain. The ponytailed girl fell to the ground with a dull expression. After Li Anping confirmed that she was dead, he nodded. Burrower Man said angrily, What are you doing? She saved you. How could you kill her? Isn't it possible to be reborn in the underworld? I just want her to leave with an intact body. Although what Li Anping said made sense, he still found it hard to accept the fact that he had killed Emma once. However, Li Anping couldn't be bothered with what he thought. With Emma's ability and experience, she wouldn't be in any danger for the time being after she recovered. Then what he had to do next, Li Anping crouched down in the direction of the blood moon, his limbs prostrating on the ground at the same time. Then his body trembled. The muscles all over his body, especially on his hands and feet, swelled up as if they were filled with air. Boundless power was transmitted from his limbs to the ground. Even though Li Anping didn't move at all, hundreds of cracks had already appeared on the ground with him, as the center, spreading out in all directions. Under the gazes of the burrower and countless zombies, Li Anping suddenly exerted force with his forelimbs. With a loud boom, he shot up into the sky like a rocket. The place where he had been prostrating collapsed continuously, forming a huge crater. After this powerful jump, Li Anping brought up a stream of air currents and flew several kilometers in the direction of the blood moon in the blink of an eye. The man stared at him from below, only to realize that Feng Xingjian's flying speed was even faster than the speed at which he could turn his neck. Just as Li Anping used up all his strength and his speed gradually slowed down in midair, a loud bang rang out. Streams of air currents appeared under Li Anping's feet, and he accelerated once again toward the blood moon. His feet instantly reached over 5 times the speed of sound, and the air seemed to have turned solid, providing tremendous propulsion for each of Li Onping's feet. It was as if a series of claps of thunder rang out in the sky. In the blink of an eye, Li Onping was only several hundred meters away from the blood moon. It turned out that the blood moon in the underworld was only over 10 kilometers tall, and its radius was about the length of a field. Looking at the blood moon in the sky that was getting closer and closer to him, Li Onping revealed a cruel smile. He bellowed, "Abyss King, get out here!" Then Li Onping, who was in midair, punched out toward the blood moon. The terrifying fist force smashed toward the blood moon with an aura that could shatter everything and destroy the void. Wherever it passed, the air was pushed away, forming a pseudo-vacuum state. Right now, if Jerome were to receive Li Onping's punch like this, he would probably be extinguished together with the flames from the punch, dying in a single punch. Right now, Li Onping's strength had already broken through the heavens. Any casual punch or kick of his could produce tremendous power. He was like a god or demon, unstoppable. A loud bang rang out. The fist force smashed into the blood moon, sending up a lot of dust. Just from the sound of the collision, it was as if several tens of thousands of tons of bombs had exploded. The entire sky seemed to be trembling because of this terrifying power. In the next second, the loud sound of the collision rang through the entire underworld at the speed of sound. An invisible force radiated out in all directions with the blood moon as the center, tearing all the dark clouds in the sky into pieces. At this moment, the entire underworld was cloudless for thousands of miles. However, after receiving such a terrifying and domineering punch, the blood moon in the sky only had a large amount of dust falling from its surface. Its body was still intact. It was a red crystalline material that flickered with a demonic red light. It did not seem to be affected by this punch at all. At this moment, the Abyss King's arrogant voice rang out. "Don't waste your energy, Li Onping. This blood moon is the gap between the entire underworld and the real world. Without my permission, nothing can pass through. It is the power of space. Do you understand? No matter how strong or powerful you are, you can't shatter space. The only thing you can do is to die of exhaustion, starvation, and old age in the underworld until you are merged with the underworld." Li Onping did not say anything. Instead, he used the void step once again and jumped several tens of meters above the blood moon. The Abyss King laughed coldly and said, "It's useless. Your ability is purely a physical attack. It's impossible for you to open the blood moon." Li Onping let out a deep breath and activated his explosive state. His entire body swelled up once again, and the muscles all over his body swelled up as if they were about to explode. Green veins popped out like steel bars, and his height increased to 5 meters. Then he smashed his fist fiercely toward the blood moon under his feet. The prowess of this punch was twice as strong as the previous one. The atmosphere screamed, and the sky shook. When the fist landed on the blood moon, a loud sound rang out like a tsunami. The entire blood moon seemed to sink a few meters. Within 100 miles of the underworld, everyone heard a second thunderous explosion. Then, their feet trembled along with the ground. It was as if the entire underworld was trembling. However, after this punch, the blood moon still seemed to be intact. The Abyss King said with lingering fear, "Are you crazy? Even if you give it your all, it's impossible." Before the Abyss King could finish his sentence, his voice was drowned out by Li Onping's third punch. For this punch, Li Onping gathered all the psychic qi in his body. The black psychic qi was like a black hole that gathered on his right fist. It brought along a tremendous force that caused one to feel despair as it smashed toward the blood moon with a force that could split the heavens and earth. When the Abyss King, who was hiding in the blood moon, saw Li Onping's punch smashing down, his blood seemed to have stopped flowing. Terrifying power gushed out from all directions, and it was as if even the space had been frozen. The prowess of this punch had already surpassed the limits of what ordinary people could imagine. Wherever the punch passed by, kacha-kacha sounds kept ringing out. It was as if the space had been shattered and all living things had been destroyed. After this punch smashed onto the blood moon, there were no longer any loud sounds. The world within a range of 100 miles seemed to be holding its breath and unable to move due to this astonishing attack. In this strange silence, no one knew how powerful and terrifyingly Onping's punch was. However, the silence could not be maintained for long. Using the greatest output of psychic chi and the greatest output of physical strength, this punch had already surpassed the limits of what Li Onping could control. After the brute force that could overturn rivers and seas hit its target, it finally erupted like a volcano. Rumble, 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 rumble. A world-shaking boom rang out. It was completely unimaginable and beyond imagination. Under Li Onping's punch, it was as if even space, time, and all matter in the world struggled and were destroyed under this pure power. On the ground that was over 10 kilometers below the blood moon, just the repercussions of the punch tore open the ground, creating a huge pit that was several tens of meters in size. If this was the case for the ground that was over 10 kilometers away from this punch, then what about the blood moon? Starting from where the punch had struck the blood moon in midair, deep cracks started to spread out. It was as if the blood moon was going to shatter into pieces. No! Accompanied by the Abyss King's agonizing cry, the cracks on the blood moon grew longer and longer. At this moment, all the resistance forces and zombies at the revival point stopped fighting and looked toward the blood moon in the sky. Even the zombies stopped fighting and looked toward the blood moon under the Abyss King's influence. The three loud booms from earlier had completely astonished the resistance forces and the zombies. However, they could not compare to what they were seeing right now, which was like a scene out of Legends. Even though they were on the ground, they could see with their naked eyes that the cracks on the blood moon were getting bigger and bigger. It was as if the entire moon was going to shatter into pieces in the next moment. Chapter 182. Stop it. You lunatic. You'll completely destroy the Netherworld, and you won't be able to get out. Hearing the Netherworld King's fearful voice, Li Onping merely smiled in disdain. He raised his fist again, and waves of black light appeared on it. In the short few seconds after the third punch, waves of psychic energy flowed continuously into his body from the psychic energy incarnation. Li Onping felt that his psychic energy had recovered by 20% to 30%. Is this also one of the functions of the psychic energy incarnation? At the thought of this, Li Onping clenched his fist and once again gathered all his psychic energy into his fist. A black hole-like light wave once again rose from his arm. With this punch, he wanted to shatter the blood moon in one go. However, at this moment, Li Onping suddenly turned to look below the blood moon. A large yellow cloud was rapidly approaching. No, it was not a yellow cloud, but a sandstorm formed from countless yellow sand. It was surging toward the sky and toward Li Onping. With Li Onping's eyesight, he could faintly see two other people in the yellow sand. Are they Wolf and the Flying General? Li Onping laughed coldly. Then, without moving his fist, he took in a deep breath. A strong gust of wind instantly rose in the surroundings, and endless air was sucked in by Li Onping. His chest also expanded at a rate visible to the naked eye. After taking in this breath, Li Onping spat out fiercely in the direction where the sand was flying from, letting out a deafening roar that shook the heavens and earth. Scram! 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 The entire netherworld suddenly became turbulent, and the mountains and rivers changed colors. Huge air currents and sound waves that were visible to the naked eye attacked the sand clouds like a storm. Bang, 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 bang. The sand that had gathered in the sky collapsed upon contact with the roar. It was immediately scattered by this roar and fell to the ground. For a moment, it was as if yellow rain was falling from the sky. Wolf and the Flying General, who had been hiding in the sand earlier, were now bleeding from their 7 orifices. They swayed and fell to the ground amidst the roar. Li Onping's roar used up all the power in his organs. Regardless of whether it was the power of the air currents or the sound waves, they were enough to cause mountains and rivers to reverse and the stars and moon to shift. Not only were the 3 level 5 ability users instantly pushed back by his roar, but the blood moon under his feet was also on the verge of collapse. The surface of the blood moon was already covered in countless cracks. It kept swaying in the terrifying sound waves and air currents like a small boat in a storm that could be destroyed at any moment. At this moment, the psychic chi in Li Onping's body had been restored to about 70% with the help of the psychic chi incarnation. The psychic chi on his clenched fist was as thick as ink. The pitch-black color was like the deepest black hole in the universe, brewing a shocking destructive power. Seeing this, the Nether King and the Blood Moon panicked and shouted, "Stop, Li Onping! I'll let you out. I'll let you out, okay? Don't mess around anymore." Oomph. A cold smile flashed past the corners of Li Onping's lips. He didn't pay him any attention, his fist already smashing towards the Blood Moon below his feet like a meteor. 5 minutes ago, on the ground, Hansen released several punches through the air. The purple radiance he released directly tore apart the several hundred zombies in front of him. However, soon after, even more zombies surged over. His head was covered in sweat. "Is it over? My rebirth count is about to run out as well." Lager laughed nervously from the side. "We're finished, we're all finished. No matter how we die, we'll always be reborn in this place. The surroundings are also completely surrounded by the zombie army. We're dead for sure this time." Apart from the 2 of them, there were roughly 100 other resistance fighters who were still fighting in the zombie army's encirclement. However, no matter how many zombies they killed, these zombies would immediately be reborn in this place. Looking down from the sky, the number of zombies didn't decrease at all. Meanwhile, the resistance fighters' stamina, psychic energy, and spirit were all limited. A single mistake, and they would be directly torn to pieces by the surrounding zombies, and then they would be reborn and thrown back into battle. However, there was a limit to the number of times they could be reborn. As time passed, their numbers dwindled, and so did their morale. "Where's the leader? Where's the leader? Why didn't the leader come and save us? Why do we keep being reborn in the same place?" Cries, angry roars, despair, and giving up. As more and more of the resistance fighters were absorbed by the underworld, more and more people gave up and felt despair. Even Hansen, who was the most resolute in his resistance, revealed a hint of dejection in his eyes. "It's really over." As he sighed in his heart, his legs went soft. He, who had exhausted all his stamina and psychic energy, knelt on the ground. A large wave of zombies rushed up and completely drowned him. A heart-wrenching pain came. When Hansen regained his senses, he knew that he had been reborn. He gathered his psychic energy and jumped up from the ground. Hansen, who was preparing to fight, saw an unbelievable scene. For some reason, the surrounding zombies had stopped attacking. They all stood there in a daze, looking in the direction of the blood moon. "What's wrong?" Hansen asked in bewilderment. "I don't know." Beside him, Roger also shook his head. They suddenly stopped attacking, because he wanted to find the underworld king. Emma's voice suddenly sounded in everyone's ears. "Leader." Everyone gathered around her. Hansen said anxiously, "Leader, why are you here?" Could it be? Emma shook her head and looked around. There were only 70 people left in the resistance that had not been absorbed. Including the living dead, there were only a little more than 100 people left. She sighed, looked at the blood moon in the sky, and said softly, "All we can do now is wait quietly, wait for the result of this battle." Right at this moment, a loud sound suddenly rang in everyone's ears. "What's that sound? Is it thunder?" The dark clouds in the sky have all disappeared. Disappeared? What's going on? Hansen looked at the blood moon in the sky in confusion. At this moment, Hawkeye cried out. His pupils contracted, and his finger trembled as he pointed at the blood moon. "There's a man. There's a man on the blood moon. How was that possible? Who's up there? Is it the underworld king?" "No." Hawkeye squinted his eyes and used his ability to look at the blood moon. The distance of more than 10 kilometers was constantly shortened. He suddenly shouted, "It's that man, the newcomer who has been unconscious." He seems to be attacking the blood moon. Just as the word newcomer entered everyone's mind, an even more terrifying roar sounded above their heads. It wasn't just a loud noise. The ground under their feet was also trembling. Everyone looked at the blood moon. It seemed that the entire underworld was trembling because of the loud noise just now. Many people fell to the ground, and a large number of zombies also fell to the ground. They couldn't get up for a while. The whole scene looked like an earthquake. At the same time, more than 1,000 meters away from the resistance, countless yellow sand flew into the sky. Wolf and the flying general followed the yellow sand and rushed towards the blood moon in the sky. Hawkeye's face was full of disbelief as he pointed at the blood moon in the sky. That man is attacking the blood moon. The sound just now was that man attacking the blood moon. He's smashing it with his fist. Suddenly, looking at the yellow sand flying into the sky, he shouted again, "It's Sandstorm and the others. They're going to stop that man." How is that possible? What kind of attack can cause such a huge commotion? That man isn't a 4th level energy rank. His fist can shake the entire underworld? Impossible. Roger looked at the sky in disbelief. How can there be such a monster? Sandstorm and the others are going too. He's dead. Emma frowned and wanted to use her ability to stop Sandstorm and the others. But before she could do anything, a black sun lit up in the sky, followed by a third loud noise. Explosions that sounded like the end of the world rang out in the sky, followed by a series of earth-shattering noises. The resistance army could only feel the earth quaking and the mountains shaking. It was as if even the space of the underworld was letting out creaking sounds, as if it could not bear the burden. At the same time, a deep crack appeared on the blood moon in the sky, as if it was torn apart by someone. The crack was so deep that even the resistance on the ground could see it clearly. Everyone held their breath as they looked at the terrifying scene in the sky. This mythical battle had deeply shocked them. Roger looked at the sky with fear. Anson's mouth was wide open in disbelief. Emma's eyes were full of excitement. At this moment, the surroundings were silent. Everyone looked at the blood moon in silence. Other than Hawkeye, none of them could see what was going on. It was as if there was an invisible pressure urging them to look and wait for the result of this battle. Then they heard a shout. After a series of words, the sea of sand that flew into the sky rolled back like a rain of sand. Then, another black sun lit up in the sky. Everyone on the ground felt their hearts tighten. After a loud noise, they heard cracking noises. It sounded like the space around them was shattering. The blood moon in the sky completely disintegrated after the loud noise. It turned into countless pieces and fell to the ground. The disintegration of the blood moon meant that the underworld was about to collapse. Chapter 183. The collapse of the blood moon finally allowed Li Onping to open up a path to the real world. Therefore, in the venue, when Pluto's chest was cut open by a strong and powerful hand, a man slowly crawled out from Pluto's chest. Pluto's chest looked like a passage to an unknown world. However, at this moment, he was spitting out blood and had a painful look on his face. He didn't look relaxed at all. This was because when Li Onping shattered the blood moon, the real Pluto was also blasted into pieces. At this time, Pluto in the real world was just a puppet that was gradually disintegrating along with the collapse of the underworld. However, Zhurong didn't know about this. When he saw Li Onping's upper body appear on Pluto's chest, although he didn't know what was going on, he still shouted loudly and spat out a flame of thousands of degrees at Li Onping with his palm. Facing the flame that was coming at him, Li Onping simply waved his hand and used an empty palm. Not only did he extinguish the flame, but the white air shock wave also hit Zhurong directly. A series of crackling sounds came from Zhurong's body. He didn't know how many bones he had broken. He spat out blood and flew more than 10 meters away, crashing through the wall. Then, with more than 10 consecutive bangs, Zhurong had crashed through more than 10 walls and flew directly to the square outside the venue. In the short few seconds when everyone was stunned, Li Onping had already hit Zhurong to the point that they didn't know whether he was dead or alive. Then, he pressed his hands on Pluto's body, as if he was trying to break free from an unknown space. The puppet Pluto was like a broken puppet. Its body was constantly disintegrating, and the hole in its chest was getting bigger and bigger. Lianping's body was crawling out inch by inch from inside. The Xia Dragonfinch's people all stood up and looked at Lianping passionately, especially Li Qian. She directly cried and stared at the familiar and reliable figure with red eyes. Sir is not dead. Under the protection of his men, Ivan too watched as Lianping crawled out of Pluto's body and quickly retreated in the direction of the gate. The remaining members of the Fire Dragon Vanguard surrounded Pluto and Lianping, but none of them dared to make a move. Everyone at the scene stood up and stared at the man who looked like a devil that had crawled out of hell. King Qilin looked at Lianping in disbelief. "What's going on? Is this Lianping?" The youth named Yu'er at the side said in surprise. "Imperial Father, what's going on? Was the Hell King killed by Lianping?" The old man and the young man stared at Lianping in shock and said, "He launched a single strike with only one strike, and we don't even know if Zhu Rong is still alive or not. How can an empty palm strike be so powerful? It's like the main cannon of a battleship." At this moment, Lianping grabbed the Nether King's body with both hands and tore it with force. He directly tore the Nether King into two halves, and his body instantly broke free. Not only that, countless figures crawled out of Pluto's body. In just a few seconds, there were more than 100 people in the venue. Emma, Hansen, Roger, and the others looked at the venue and the outside world. They burst into tears and cried, "We're finally out. We're finally out. Ha, I'm back." Seeing these people crying with joy, Lianping shouted impatiently, "Shut up." He looked at Emma and pointed in the direction of the Xia Dragonfinch. "Stay with them and protect them." Seeing Lianping in the crowd, the resistance soldiers and zombies were shocked. Most of them recognized Lianping, especially when they heard Hawkeye and Emma say that Lianping destroyed the blood moon in the sky, scared off a sandstorm, and killed Pluto to free them. At this moment, they were more afraid of Lianping than they were of him. When they heard Lianping's words, they immediately followed Emma and walked toward the Xia Dragonfinch like withered chicks. When Emma heard Lianping's orders, she was very obedient and immediately ordered everyone to stand together with the Xia Dragonfinch. As for the Xia Dragonfinch, although Lu Sheng, Li Qian, and the others wanted to ask Lianping what was going on, they knew that it was not the time. This was because at this moment, everyone in the venue, other than the great Xia Dragonfinch, was glaring at Lianping like a pack of wolves. The atmosphere of a battle was on the verge of breaking out. At this moment, some ordinary leaders, including Ivan too, had already taken advantage of the time just now to leave the venue quickly and quietly. Among them were the 9 royals of the Xia, Wang Chong, Li Wei, and the others. They also looked at Lianping, whom they thought was dead, in horror as he fled with Ivan too. Lianping just glanced at them and didn't say anything. He did not know what the current situation was, but there were at least 3 level 5 ability users in the entire venue. They were different from the Flying General and Sandstorm in the underworld. They did not lose their intelligence, and their strength was greatly reduced. Lianping did not choose to start a war with them without knowing the situation. After the ordinary people left, the rest of the people in the venue were all ability users. Among them, Mammon and Yulia from the League of Stars were the leaders. The two of them looked at Lianping with complicated expressions. Bromon, who was behind them, looked resentful and gloomy as he stared at Lianping. However, he was afraid that Lianping would discover him, so he had no choice but to carefully hide behind the 2 level 5 ability users. This feeling made him feel even more grieved. However, Lianping did not take them seriously. He just stayed there and waited quietly for the Xia Dragonfinch and Emma to meet up with them. However, even though he just stood there without doing anything, no one in the venue dared to move. They were not idiots. Lianping had crippled the Pluto King and Zhurong the moment he appeared. His strength was obvious to all. At this moment, no one dared to stand out. Seeing that everyone was standing together, Lianping said to Emma, "Can you teleport them away?" Emma said softly, "No, I lack coordinates and vision. After saying that, she glanced at everyone in the venue, especially Mammon, Yulia, and King Qilin. They all gave her a very, very dangerous feeling. At this moment, Lung Shuang, who was in the Fire Dragon Vanguard, finally could not take it anymore. He said loudly, "Li Onping, do you really want to leave just like that? Today is the day that Xia and the Ice Fortress signed the Armistice Agreement. You assassinated our Fire Dragon Vanguard's leader and caused such a negative impact. Do you still want to leave? Today, Lord Mammon and Lord Yulia from the League of Stars are here. Do you think you can leave just like that?" "Oh, Armistice Agreement?" When Lianping heard Lung Shuang's words, he suddenly turned his head and looked at an empty spot. The others did not understand what he was looking at, but Lung Shuang was scared out of his wits. His optical dislocation ability could make others unable to detect his real location. It was because of this ability that he dared to be the first to speak. However, when Lianping heard him speak, he immediately looked at where his real body was. Then, at the next moment, Lianping took a step forward. Lung Shuang only saw a black shadow flash in front of him, and then he was grabbed by Lianping by the neck. His face was flushed red, and he wanted to say something. However, Lianping's hand was tightly clenching his windpipe, and he could not say a word. In the eyes of the surrounding people, they could only see Lianping appearing in an empty space as if he had teleported. Then, he reached out his hand and grabbed a man. Lianping did not even look at Lung Shuang. Instead, he asked Lu Sheng, "Lu Sheng, what is this Armistice Agreement?" Lu Sheng shouted, "It's a treaty that the League of Stars and the Ice Fortress forced us to sign." Although Lu Sheng did not say it in detail, the word forced was enough to explain everything. Lianping coldly looked at the Fire Dragon Vanguard who wanted to step forward but did not dare to. The aptitude users from various countries who were ready to make a move, as well as the people from the League of Stars and the Baiwei country who had serious expressions on their faces. Everyone who met his gaze felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over them, and their souls trembled uncontrollably. Mammon finally could not help but say, "Lianping, I know that the Xia Dragonfinch and the Fire Dragon Vanguard have a huge conflict, but this Armistice Agreement is the League leader's idea. Since Pluto is dead, then the agreement can be changed." He did not say it clearly, but his meaning was clear. He was using the only level 6 aptitude user, the Queen of Heaven, as his backer, as well as hinting to Lianping that since Pluto was dead, then to Xia and the Ice Fortress could be switched. Although his tone was a bit harsh, it also showed the weakness in his heart. It was obvious that Lianping's performance had frightened him. Regardless of whether it was him or Yulia, they did not have 100% confidence in defeating Lianping. Therefore, Mammon hoped that he could stabilize Lianping and retreat unscathed. When he truly understood Lianping's true strength, or when the League of Stars sent reinforcements, he would then deal with Lianping. Lianping smiled coldly and glanced at the people around him. Baiwei Country, Flan, Inshi, One Breath Path, Fire Dragon Vanguard, League of Stars. All the aptitude users present felt as if they had been glanced at by the Grim Reaper. A terrifying pressure emitted from Lianping's body, causing their hearts to beat faster and faster. He reached out his hand and broke Lung Shuang's neck. Her corpse fell to the ground like trash. Lianping said calmly, "There's no need for the Armistice Agreement." He paused for a moment, and all sorts of voices could be heard from a few kilometers away. He then said, "This is Morocco, right? Since you're all here, don't be in a hurry to leave. All of you can stay. It's cold here, so it's easier to preserve corpses. I can even get someone to transport them back." Everyone looked at Lianping in shock and anger. King Qilin said angrily, "Arrogant." The old man from One Breath Path said in shock, "Is he going to fight all of us?" Yulia was so angry that she laughed. "Old man, it seems like he's courting death. You can't blame us." Mammon looked at Lianping doubtfully. "Lianping, you're indeed very strong, but I don't think it's possible to deal with so many of us, right? Also, do you know that once you start a war with us, there'll be no place for you in the entire Eastern continent?" The Xia Dragonfinch's people also became nervous especially Lu Sheng and the others. They didn't expect that Li Anping would start a war with so many forces the moment he appeared. It was as if the entire world was his enemy. Even someone as arrogant as Yan Bei gasped and looked at Li Anping in disbelief. Li Anping didn't say anything. Of course, he couldn't tell them directly that after devouring Blood Demon, Black, and the Netherworld King, his current strength had far exceeded their imagination. Since he understood the situation, he chose to use his actions to explain everything. Li Anping's body moved at full speed, and he disappeared from everyone's sight. In a fast-moving world, everything seemed to have stopped. However, in less than 1/10 of a second, when everyone reacted, the entire venue was filled with blood. Those who couldn't withstand Li Anping's punch were all smashed into countless pieces. Chapter 184. In an instant, the entire meeting room was filled with blood. Ordinary ability users didn't even have the chance to react before they died under Li Anping's fist. When Li Anping once again appeared at his original position, other than Emma and Lu Sheng, there were only 4 people left standing. They were the Qilin King, Mammon, and Yulia, the 3 level 5 ability users. The 3 of them were the strongest, but the reason why they were unharmed was because Li Anping didn't do anything to them. Other than them, there was an elderly man from the One Qi sect. It was unknown what method he used to block Li Anping's attack, but he was looking at Li Anping with a grim expression. Seeing the blood on the floor, the Qilin King was the first to bellow. Amidst a series of popping sounds, he expanded rapidly, and silver scales grew all over his body. Streaks of electricity kept emitting from his body. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a 3-meter-tall, half-human, half-beast monster. Seeing that Li Anping had killed his son and subordinates right before his eyes, the Qilin King was enraged. He looked at Li Anping with bloodshot eyes and bellowed, "Die! Rumble!" The Qilin King's thick fist that was covered in silver scales was like a cannonball, smashing onto Li Anping's position. The entire meeting room trembled, but other than leaving behind a huge pit on the ground, Li Anping had already disappeared. Just then, his voice rang out from outside the door. "I don't wish to fight here. Let's change the venue." Roar. Hearing Li Anping's voice, the Qilin King let out a beastly roar and dashed out with a flash of electricity. Everywhere he passed by, people were thrown off their feet. Countless walls were destroyed, revealing the steel bars, cement, and electric wires in the walls. He created a passageway that led to the outside. Seeing the Qilin King dashing out, Mammon frowned and said to Yulia, "Follow the Qilin King. Don't let his anger get to his head. It's too dangerous for him to go up against Li Anping in his current state." Yulia nodded solemnly. The next moment, she had already rushed out of the door and disappeared into the corridor. Although Yulia was very confident in her own abilities, the strength that Li Anping had displayed just now was enough to attract her attention. After Yulia left, Mammon turned his attention to the Xia Dragonfinch and the others. Psychic energy slowly emanated from his body. His slightly bent back straightened up, and his eyes emitted a dangerous light. The expressions of Lu Sheng and the others changed as they looked at Mammon nervously. At this moment, Emma took a step forward. Her psychic energy also surged up high. The powerful energy contained within represented her identity as a level 5 ability user. She knew that Li Anping had left because he didn't want to implicate them. Moreover, Li Anping had also asked her to protect Lu Sheng and the others. On top of that, be it Li Anping's strength or the fact that he had saved Emma from the underworld, it was enough for Emma to stand out. Even if she was facing a level 5 ability user whose strength she didn't know. Mammon thought, this woman is also a level 5 ability user? Yulia and King Qilin had already chased after her. This woman has to protect the Xia Dragonfinch's people and is unable to help Li Anping. This is even better. It will give us a chance to surround and attack Li Anping. Now isn't the time to attack the Xia Dragonfinch and this woman. Mammon looked at Emma and snorted coldly. He didn't do anything and turned to leave. At the same time, he said, Xi and Chang'e. If you want to take revenge, then come over together. You've seen Li Anping's strength. You'll never be able to take revenge with just you alone. The old man from Ichi's sect, who was called Xi and Chang'e by Mammon, had a pale face. He looked at the blood on the ground and silently followed Mammon out. Lu Sheng let out a sigh of relief and said, "Okay, let's go out first. With so many level 5 ability users fighting, we might not be able to withstand the aftermath. And this lady, I'm Emma." Emma nodded at Lu Sheng and the others. "I'll tell you the details later. Let's go out first." Most people agreed and hurriedly ran out. A few people, like Sun Hao and Yin Bei, who were unwilling, could only choose to retreat in the face of the huge gap in strength. However, Li Qian still couldn't help but say to Emma, "Miss, you're a level 5 ability user, right? Don't worry about us. We can protect ourselves. Please go and help, sir." "You're talking about Li Anping?" Emma glanced at Li Qian and sighed as she walked out of the door. "If you had seen his battle in the underworld, you wouldn't have said that to me. That man doesn't need help at all. The ones who really need help are those who are attacking him." At this moment, Mammon suddenly shouted from outside, "Zhurong, how long are you going to play dead for? You've seen Li Anping's attitude. If you don't want to die, then attack him together with us. If we succeed, you'll be the next leader of the Fire Dragon Vanguard." Mammon's reply was a cold snort. Then, the surrounding temperature rose rapidly as if it was the hottest summer. More than half of Morocco's snow started to melt. Hot sweat kept coming out of people's heads. A pillar of fire even shot up into the sky as if it wanted to squeeze all the moisture in the air dry. On the other side, Li Anping had already arrived several kilometers away after taking a few void steps in midair. Behind him, a bolt of lightning was hot on his heels. Suddenly, Li Anping stopped on top of a building. King Qilin roared and punched towards Li Anping's body with endless lightning and ear-piercing sounds. The lightning wrapped around King Qilin's arm like a terrifying lightning dragon. Although Li Anping's body was strong, he would still be paralyzed by the lightning and burned by the high temperature. Therefore, he didn't use his body to block King Qilin's punch. Instead, he used his palm. The white shockwave collided with King Qilin's lightning fist. King Qilin was immediately sent flying and rolled for more than 10 meters before coming to a stop. Li Anping stood still and looked at King Qilin, who was slowly standing up. He said calmly, "You'd better wait. If you're alone, you'll just die." Hearing Li Anping's words, King Qilin didn't continue to attack. Although he was still angry, Li Anping's palm and words calmed him down temporarily. He knew that Li Anping was right. Although Li Anping was only a level 4 ability user, his strength was simply unfathomable. Facing King Qilin's full attack, it was like facing a naughty child. The seemingly powerful palm was just a casual attack. It was not brave for a person to recklessly fight with an opponent of this level. It was just suicide. After all, King Qilin had been on the battlefield for a long time. Although he was facing the pain of losing his son, he still forced himself to suppress the anger in his heart. While guarding against Li Anping, he waited for the others. They didn't let Li Anping and King Qilin wait for long. A flame shot up into the sky. Zhurong had turned into a flaming man and appeared above the two of them. Then it was Mammon and Exine Chang'e. Mammon had a pair of huge gray wings on his back. It looked like two huge palms on his back. Mammon's right hand was carrying Exine Chang'e. Li Anping looked at the 3 level 5 aptitude users in front of him and Exine Chang'e, a level 4 aptitude user, with an interesting smile on his face. Then, he turned his head to look at a TV tower in the distance. On the TV tower, Yulia was holding a sniper rifle that was more than 2 meters long. She was looking at Li Anping through the scope. When she saw Li Anping looking in her direction, her heart tightened. She felt that her body had been seen through by Li Anping. How was it possible? This place is at least 10 kilometers away from there. He can even see this? Not to mention what Yulia was thinking, Li Anping revealed a satisfied smile on his face. "How strong am I now? I hope you can give me an answer." Then, he pointed at the 4 of them and said, "The 4 of you, come at me together." Arrogant. The 4 of them, including Exine Chang'e, cursed in their hearts. However, the next moment, it wasn't King Qilin, Mammon, Zhurong, or Exanchana who attacked. The ground shook violently. Then, a huge arm broke out of the ground and appeared behind Lianping. It was made of rocks and was more than 50 meters long. The size of the palm was enough to cover the entire roof of the building. White Short Star roared, "Lianping, pay with your life for the leaders." Then, the giant palm slapped toward Lianping, who was on the roof of the building, with the momentum of the sky collapsing. It was White Short Star who rushed over after hearing the news that Pluto was killed. Just as he attacked, 9 huge fireballs that could melt gold and iron appeared around Zhurong, who was in midair. King Qilin's body was surrounded by lightning. He was like a giant beast made of lightning. Mammon's palms and wings spread open. Huge black, withered hands emerged from the void behind him. As for Yulia, who was far away on the TV tower, her eyes suddenly began to reflect the endless changes in the future. The bullet in her sniper rifle was ready to be fired. Just as White Short Star's palm slapped toward Lianping, in less than 1/10 of a second, the other 4 level 5 ability users also displayed their abilities. They swore to kill this arrogant person in front of them on the spot. They were full of confidence. They believed that there wasn't any ability user in this world who could face the joint attack of 5 level 5 ability users. With 5 peerless powerhouses working together, even if their opponent was the leader of the League of Stars, they still had the guts to fight. However, facing such a powerful force that could topple a country, facing such a terrifying attack that could defeat all armies, Lianping only grinned. In the next moment, the entire world seemed to slow down. Be it the burning flames, the falling palm, or the electric sparks in the air, everything in this world seemed to be in slow motion at this moment. Transcending all forms of sound and appearance, Lianping entered an extreme speed that mortals could not imagine at this moment. It turns out that on the day of the upload, the management function of the VIP chapters will only be opened in the afternoon. Then, the VIP chapters can only be uploaded. This is really a tragedy. Chapter 185. He threw a punch toward the sky. Silently, the surging power had already hit the giant palm that was falling from the sky. The giant arm, made of stone, instantly turned into countless stones and fell to the ground. However, just as the stones were falling slowly, Lianping's figure flashed and appeared behind King Qirin. His fist broke through layers of air and splashed out ripples. The invisible fist force had already hit King Qirin's back. However, as a veteran level 5 ability user, King Qirin was indeed unique. Under Lianping's rapid attack, King Qirin actually relied on his experience and instinct to punch his own back in advance. When the fist and the fist force collided, King Qirin had already flown out with a huge momentum. Lianping gave Qilin King a look of surprise. Even though the other party relied on Qilin Blood's ability, among these level 5 ability users, he was the one who had the highest chance of being close to him in terms of physical reaction speed. He never expected the other party to actually be able to block his fist like this. However, when he saw King Qirin's expressionless face and blank eyes, he understood. Without thinking or reaction, it's completely based on the instincts formed from decades of battle and the stimulation of electric current to control the body. Interesting. Thinking of this, Lianping took a heavy step and rushed toward King Qirin, who was flying back. As he took a step, the whole building let out a loud boom and a creaking sound as if it couldn't bear the weight. The building had already started to collapse from the top. However, the speed of the collapse was too slow for Lianping. He had already arrived in front of King Qirin and punched him in the face. Following this punch, a white fist force, or rather, an air shock wave, was sent toward King Qirin. With a bang, the fist was blocked again. However, King Qirin also paid a heavy price. His palm that blocked the attack was completely deformed. However, King Qirin still looked confused. Or rather, his brain didn't have time to react to the pain. His other palm had already relied on the acceleration of the electric current and instinctively attacked Lianping's ribs. Unfortunately, even so, his speed was still far from Lianping's. Lianping easily dodged his attack, and then Lianping punched him in the stomach. The terrifying power directly shattered King Qilin's internal organs. The scales on the surface of his body also fell and splattered in all directions. Lianping had already killed King Qilin with 3 consecutive punches. However, King Qilin's death was not meaningless. He had bought time for the other aptitude users to react. The first one to launch an attack was Zhu Rong. He had been knocked away by Lianping twice, so he clearly knew how powerful Lianping was. Especially now, in the blink of an eye, King Qilin had fallen to the ground with the collapse of the roof. Therefore, he attacked with all his might. After the 9 huge fireballs pierced through the air toward Lianping, a terrifying heat wave surged toward him. Before the fireballs even got close, the collapsed building was already emitting billowing smoke. If these 9 fireballs were to explode at the same time, the entire Marok city would probably be turned into ashes. When Lianping killed King Qilin with 3 punches, Mammon's and Xian Chana's expressions changed and became even more solemn. However, when Zhu Rong performed this move, they turned pale with fright. This was not only because Zhu Rong's move was extremely dangerous, but also because they were within the attack range of this attack. Immediately, Mammon flapped the wings on his back and quickly retreated while dragging Xian Chana with him. The two of them felt that their skin had already started to prickle unbearably. Waves of heat surged toward them, making their mouths dry up. However, at the next moment, Lianping's response made them even more dumbfounded. Faced with the 9 fireballs that were charging toward him, Lianping threw 9 consecutive punches toward the sky. Each punch brought about waves in the air that could be seen by the naked eye. Each of the 9 consecutive punches created a pseudo-vacuum space in the air and extinguished the fireballs. Moreover, as the tremendous force exploded in the air, even after the flames were extinguished, the vibrations formed by the explosion still spread out in all directions. The 5 buildings in the surroundings bore the brunt of the impact. It was as if they had been slapped by an invisible giant palm, and they collapsed like sand castles on the beach. The giant stone hand that was controlled by White Short Star in mid-air wanted to transform and grab toward Lianping again. However, it was also shattered by the 9 consecutive punches. It turned into sand and stones and fell to the ground. At the sight of this, both Zhu Rong and Mammon were horrified. They had never seen or even heard of someone who could create such a destructive force with pure physical strength. This was especially so for Zhu Rong. He had experienced Lianping's vacuum circle before this. However, he had not expected that after he had increased the temperature to the maximum, Lianping would still be able to extinguish his flames easily. Moreover, regardless of whether it was his expression or his actions, Lianping seemed to be more at ease compared to the previous time. Mammon was the first to let out a strange cry. He flapped his wings vigorously and flew away with Xian Chana. At this moment, he realized that he could not defeat the monster with brute force. He could only defeat him with his wits. On the other hand, Zhu Rong had a similar reaction when his ultimate move was destroyed. Flames flashed all over his body, and he flew hundreds of meters away in the blink of an eye. Lianping, who was in midair, smiled coldly as he watched the two of them escape. He stepped into the void and arrived next to a steel bar that had fallen from midair. In his high-speed state, the world seemed to have come to a standstill. He could even see the steel bar falling inch by inch. Therefore, he took out a steel drill and pointed it in Zhu Rong's direction. Boom! The atmosphere was torn apart, and a black lightning bolt seemed to have appeared in midair. When Zhu Rong heard the whistling sound in the air, a huge transparent hole had appeared in his chest. As for the steel drill, it had turned into dust under the dual effects of Lianping's tremendous strength and Zhu Rong's protective flames. However, Lianping's strength had been transmitted to Zhu Rong's body. Therefore, there was a hole in Zhu Rong's chest. Zhu Rong looked at the hole in his chest in disbelief. Fear, despair, regret, and all kinds of emotions came one after another. At this moment, death was so frightening. Zhu Rong's eyes were filled with endless regret. If he had known this would happen, he would not have gone against Li Onping. However, it was too late to know this now. The last bright flame flashed, and a second sun rose in the sky. Zhu Rong's body turned into ashes in this light. The heat and shock wave from the explosion turned several blocks into ashes, leaving a scorched earth in the center of Morocco. Countless people died without any warning. Fortunately, Zhu Rong had exploded in midair. Otherwise, the power of this attack would have been even more terrifying. Seeing this, Mammon was even more afraid. He felt like his heart was being squeezed by the Grim Reaper. He flapped his wings hard and accelerated again. "You're running away?" Li Onping's voice came from behind him. Mammon was so shocked that his face turned pale. He continued to fly without looking back. A huge amount of psychic energy shot out from his back, accelerating his body again. "You're quite fast, but you should stop." When Mammon heard this, he felt as though his neck was being grabbed by an iron claw. His body, which was flying at high speed, came to a halt in an instant. The tremendous force almost tore his neck apart. "Yulia!" Mammon roared. Amidst his fear and anger, for huge black arms reached out from the space around him and grabbed towards his back. Li Onping looked at the 4 arms that were grabbing at him. Each of the 4 arms was the size of a strong man. They were completely black and looked very withered, like tree bark. The most amazing thing was that their roots seemed to come from broken space. It was as if they were summoned from another world. Li Onping looked curious. He let go of Mammon and tried to grab one of the arms. But when he used a little strength, he realized that he could not break the arm. This was Mammon's ability, Void Grasp. He could summon an unknown object from another world. The strength of these black arms was about 10 tons. This was nothing. The most important thing was that these arms could not be damaged. No matter what kind of attack they received, these arms would remain intact. The next moment, Li Onping's other hand and legs were grabbed by the Void Grasp. The roots of the Void Grasp were fixed in the space tunnel. It was also indestructible. It could be considered one of the most powerful defensive and control abilities. While Li Onping was temporarily controlled, Li Onping might be able to break free in the next second. Yulia, who was far away on the television tower, grabbed this rare opportunity and aimed her sniper rifle at Li Onping's head. Then, she aimed at his hands, legs, and heart. This was caused by Li Onping's underestimation of his opponent and Mammon's special ability. She might not have such a perfect opportunity in the next few years, or even decades. 6 consecutive shots, all completed within a second, directly emptying the sniper rifle's magazine. The 6 bullets carried powerful kinetic energy and terrifying psychic energy. They rushed out of the gun barrel and appeared on the surface of Li Onping's body as if they had teleported. They passed through space and the protection of the psychic energy. They appeared on the surface of Li Onping's body. This was Yulia's ability, sure hit shot. As long as she aimed at the target, the bullets would hit the target. No matter how fast the target moved, they would not be able to dodge the bullets. This was the reason why the Alliance leader had sent Mammon and Yulia. The combination of their abilities was much more powerful than 1 + 1 = 2. Bang, bang, bang. 6 consecutive strange sounds rang out. The special bullets that carried psychic energy directly blasted Li Onping's head and broke all his limbs. The most terrifying thing was that there was a long trail of blood spurting out from Li Onping's chest. A bloody hole the size of a head appeared on his chest. Yulia's eyes narrowed when she saw Li Onping's injuries. If it had been anyone else, their body would have been torn into pieces if they had been hit by one of the 6 bullets. However, Li Onping was only severely injured. This showed how strong his body was. Yulia knew how strong Li Onping's body was. That was why she had fired 6 consecutive shots. This was already her full power. Her face was pale, but she smiled. This monster. However, at least I'm not in danger. Just as she was thinking about this, Yulia's expression changed as she looked through the scope. She picked up the magazine at the side and started to reload. On the other hand, Li Onping did not have a head. After his limbs were broken, his torso suddenly started to struggle violently. Then, he activated his soul-sucking ability. Within 1 second, all the ordinary people within a 600-meter radius died instantly. This was the city center of Morocco. More than 10,000 people died in an instant. Countless soul powers were absorbed into Lianping's body. Bones, nerves, muscles, and then skin. Lianping's limbs grew at a speed that could be seen by the naked eye. The flesh on his chest kept on compressing and changing shape, and the wound became smaller and smaller. Lianping's head, bones, and muscles had completely grown. His zombie-like head had a ferocious expression. He opened his mouth wide and let out a furious roar. Roar! Roar, 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 roar. Not only did Mammon and the rest attacks not injure Lianping, but they also enraged him. Chapter 186. The air was shrieking, and the ground was trembling. Mammon was astonished as he looked at the monster in front of him in disbelief. He knew that Lianping had the ultra-rapid regeneration ability, but he had not expected that Lianping would be able to recover in an instant after suffering such serious injuries. Absolute power and speed, as well as this regeneration ability. Is he really a level 4 ability user? However, Mammon was a veteran level 5 ability user and did not hesitate at this critical moment. He activated his ability once again, and several tens of arms appeared from the void space around Lianping, grabbing onto his body. Then, these arms from another world dragged Lianping in a void space. It was as if countless evil spirits had grabbed onto Lianping, wanting to drag him to hell. This was Mammon's ability, another use of the void grasp. It allowed him to banish strong enemies to another world. Mammon did not know which world it was. It was just that they were no longer on the same planet. In any case, he had never seen anyone who had been banished to another world return. Seeing that Lianping's body was being dragged into void space inch by inch, Mammon's expression became even more savage. He let out an enraged bellow, shattering all the windows in the nearby buildings. At the next moment, Lianping's arms and legs trembled fiercely, and strong gales exploded. Not only did they blow over a few small buildings in the surroundings, but they also shook off all the huge hands that were grabbing onto him, breaking free from the control of the void grasp. The void grasp power was far from Mammon's. Earlier on, it had only managed to lock Lianping temporarily by relying on its indestructibility and the fact that it was fixed in space-time passageways and could not be moved. Once Lianping understood, he did not try to tear the void grasp apart, but shook it off directly. This thing was unable to control him. At the instant Lianping broke free from the void grasp, Mammon understood that his attack had failed and threw Xian Changhe toward Lianping. He then let out a loud bellow, and layers of stacking and endless arms appeared for void space around him. On the other side, after Xian Changhe was thrown out, he could not be bothered to curse out loud. He did not have the ability to fly either. He could only hug his head with both hands and close his eyes as he rushed towards Lianping. Lianping didn't even look at him. He directly punched Xian Changhe's arm. Xian Changhe's face turned pale, but he wasn't hurt at all. Instead, he hugged Lianping as he approached him. Lianping glanced at him coldly. In an instant, dozens of punches landed on Xian Changhe's body. Xian Changhe's body was dented from head to toe. However, other than the deformation of his body, there were no injuries at all. This finally aroused Lianping's doubts. However, this doubt was instantly washed away by the fury of being seriously injured. Since dozens of punches can kill you, then hundreds of punches, thousands of punches, tens of thousands of punches. Lianping's hands shot toward Xian Changhe, leaving behind a series of afterimages. The latter looked as if he was being attacked by hundreds of fists. The concentrated sounds of fists colliding with flesh rang out in the air. The wind pressure formed by the fists brought about many storms in the air. Xian Changhe had no way of fending off such terrifying close-range attacks. He could only hug his head tightly and try his best to resist. Xian Changhe's ability was to absorb kinetic energy. The power of his fists, legs, bullets, bombs, He could absorb all of the opponent's kinetic energy, rendering the opponent's attacks ineffective. It was because of this ability that he dared to chase after Li Onping. He wanted to surround and kill Li Onping together with the other level 5 ability users. After all, Li Onping had killed his grandson. Xian Long Mammon also knew about this ability of his, which was why he had thrown him over, wanting to stop Li Onping. However, in just a few seconds, Xian Changhe didn't know how many times Li Onping had punched him. He only felt that his body was getting bigger and bigger, and the amount of kinetic energy he was absorbing had far surpassed his previous limits. Bang! Xian Changhe's body finally couldn't withstand the endless absorption of kinetic energy and exploded, turning into countless fragments that scattered in all directions. Blood and flesh also splattered toward Li Onping's body. However, with a quick movement, he had already dodged the splattering flesh and blood and continued to charge toward Mammon. On the other side, Mammon made use of the time that Xian Changhe had bought to summon hundreds of huge black palms from the Void Grip, wanting to envelop Feng Xingjian's entire body. Countless huge palms stacked on top of each other, wrapping around each other, forming a huge black sphere that kept on contracting. It was just a little bit away from completely protecting Mammon. By then, with the indestructible property of the Void Grip, even if he was facing Li Onping, he would still be able to hold on for a long time. If it was someone else, he would have already succeeded. However, it was a pity that he was facing Li Onping. Feng Xingjian might be the fastest man in the world right now. A black figure swept past at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. Li Onping charged toward Mammon directly. The black Void Grip kept on closing. To ordinary people, it only took an instant to close. However, to Li Onping, who was moving at full speed, this was enough time for him to break through. Li Onping passed through the gaps that were about to close. Like a black bolt of lightning, he pierced through the black sphere that the Void Grip had formed. When he appeared in midair again, there was a heart that was still struggling and beating in his hand. This heart was Mammon's heart. At the last moment, when the Void Grip was about to close, Li Onping charged in and grabbed Mammon's heart out. In that short moment, even when Mammon's heart was exposed to the air, it was still beating as if it was in his heart. The next moment, the sphere formed by the Void Grip finally closed completely, leaving no gaps. However, what he was protecting now was only a corpse. Crushing the heart in his hand, Li Onping stomped on the ground violently. Shock waves rose up, and in the midst of the raging hurricane, he had already appeared a few kilometers away. Following that, with another void step, he had already appeared above the television tower. However, Yulia's original position was now empty. Only a 2-meter-long sniper rifle was left. When Li Onping broke free from the Void Grip, she had chosen to escape. She hid her psychic energy and blended into the crowd. For a moment, even Li Onping could not find her. Roar! A furious roar resounded throughout Morocco. The passers-by on the ground looked in the direction of the roar with fear. They could see that the TV tower was being twisted and squeezed by an invisible force. Li Onping threw a punch from top to bottom, directly smashing the entire TV tower into a pancake with his fist force. At this time, the continuous killing had increased Li Onping's strength by 5. 1. Speed by 4. 8. And stamina by 5. 6. His overall attributes had reached strength 28. 0. Speed 26. 6. And stamina 29. 4. If there were gods in this world, this was a number that would make them tremble. In the battle command room of the Ice Fortress, everyone held their breaths as they watched the live broadcast from the satellite on the big screen. When they learned that all the Fire Dragon Vanguard members in the conference room had been turned into a pile of minced meat, all the leaders in the room felt their hearts twitching. When they saw that King Qilin was killed by Li Onping with a few punches, they gasped and began to think about the safety of the command room. When Ivan II saw that Zhurong was killed, he fainted from anger. Your Majesty, protect His Majesty and leave. Sir, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Armor Divisions are ready. Should we attack? Attack? Hurry up and get them to come back. No one is allowed to open fire without my orders. Rescue the people is the top priority. The commander looked at Li Onping's demonic means on the screen and muttered, "This battle no longer belongs to us." Everyone in the command room heaved a sigh of relief when they heard that. In the midst of the chaos, the royals and nobles began to withdraw from the command room, and even Morocco. The army that rushed over was also hurriedly driven away to avoid a head-on collision with Li Onping and the others. On the other side, in the underground shelter, the representatives of the 9 royal families were waiting for the results in fear and uneasiness. The head of the Li family, Li Wei, was pale. Every time the earth trembled and the distant explosion sounded, he couldn't help but shiver a few times. Beside him, the leaders of the Gao family, Qin family, Song family, and other families were all panicking like stray dogs. Finally, Li Wei slammed the table and stood up. "We can't wait like this. A gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. Let's hurry up and leave this place and return to Tianjin." The high-ranking people next to him all chimed in, wishing that they could grow wings and leave this troublesome place as soon as possible. Wang Chong glanced at them coldly. "What are you guys doing now? If he really wins, do you think you can hide when you return to Tianjin? Just wait here quietly for the results. Don't lose the last shred of dignity of the royal family." Li Wei said fiercely. "Wang Chong, do you think you'll have an easy time if he wins? Don't forget that you've been adding fuel to the fire during this period." Then, the two sides began to quarrel hysterically under the immense pressure. Seeing the chaos in the fallout shelter, Zhang Yinheng revealed a mocking smile. A few days later, Li Onping came back from the dead and brutally killed 4 level 5 ability users, including Pluto, Zhurong, Mammon, and King Qilin. The level 5 ability user of the League of Stars, Yulia, and the only remaining level 5 ability user of the Fire Dragon Vanguard, White Short Star, were no match for Li Onping's ferocity and fled. In addition, a large number of ability users of the Fire Dragon Vanguard, Baiwei, Yinxi, Donyang, and other large and small countries all died under Li Onping's fist. In the face of Li Onping's absolute power, Ivan II had no choice but to lower his arrogant head and announce the disbandment of the Fire Dragon Vanguard, although most of the ability users had been killed by Li Onping. After that, Li Onping left Morocco in a mess and returned to Tianjin with his subordinates. The news of the entire incident seemed to have grown wings and spread to all the continents in just a few days. When most of the higher-ups received the news, their first reaction was disbelief. Then, countless videos of Li Onping's battle with other people were watched and verified. The intelligence personnel of each country and organization also became busy, continuously verifying the accuracy of the news. They were testing the attitude of other countries. Everyone was also waiting for the League of Stars to make a move. They were even waiting to see if the world's strongest, the Queen of Heaven, would make a move against Li Onping's undisguised slap in the face. They were guessing if Li Onping, who could single-handedly defeat 6 level 5 ability users, faced the world's strongest level 6 ability user, who would win and who would lose. Not only that, the death of more than 4 level 5 ability users created an impact comparable to a worldwide earthquake. Ice Fortress, Xia, the southern countries, the overseas island countries, as well as the Western Continent Federation, Codenation, and Tyrol. In the eyes of ordinary people, the world was still the same as before, but the undercurrents hidden beneath the surface were already surging violently. When everyone was shocked by Li Onping's strength, when the countries of the Eastern Continent were in a terrible fix over the loss of ability users before them, and even more shocking news came from Tianjin. Li Onping, he announced the existence of ability users to Xia's people, also stated that he would participate in this year's Xia's imperial election. He wants to be the emperor? Is he crazy? This was what everyone thought after hearing these two news. Within the borders of Codenation, inside a bar on the street, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, tall Queen of Heaven was currently sitting at the bar counter. She held a wine glass in one hand, her eyes watching the television, currently reporting the news. The men around her were all looking at her with greedy eyes. It was as if she was the center of the bar right now. Their restless looks made people wonder if they would pounce on her in the next moment. Unfortunately, several men who thought they were quite charming had already tried to strike up a conversation with her, but they were all coldly rejected. Finally, another handsome man with delicate features, who somewhat resembled a certain celebrity in Code Nation, stood up and walked toward the bar counter under everyone's gaze. He placed the wine glass on the bar counter and revealed a smile that he thought was quite charming. "Miss, may I sit here?" The Queen of Heaven looked at him with interest, but before she said anything, she suddenly looked at the television. The president's live broadcast interview had begun. That man did not realize that the woman in front of him had focused all her attention on the television. He asked again, "May I ask?" Before he could finish his words, the Queen of Heaven coldly replied, "Scram." The man's expression changed, and he flew into a rage out of humiliation. Just as he was about to flare up, his eyes suddenly widened, and his gaze became blurry. He put down the money for his wine and walked straight out of the bar. He would go back home to sleep and forget everything that had happened in the bar today. The Queen of Heaven's gaze was fixed on the president on the television. "We strongly condemned Sia's terrorist attack in Morocco, as well as the inaction of the ICE fortress government." A series of lengthy and boring political speeches began, but the Queen of Heaven watched with relish, especially when she saw the president's expression suddenly change. The corners of her mouth curled up. Then, she saw the president's eyes roll back, and he suddenly pounced on the camera. The camera fell to the ground, and only pairs of messy footsteps could be seen, as well as the screams of women and men. The next moment, the live broadcast cut back to the studio. When she saw this, the Queen of Heaven had already walked out of the bar and onto the streets. She had a satisfied smile on her face, and the city in front of her was reflected in her eyes. However, it was different from the bustling city at night. The city reflected in her eyes seemed to be wrapped in endless flames. At this moment, the phone rang. The Queen of Heaven picked up the phone and frowned. "I know. Jinhai is at the critical moment of his breakthrough. Don't let him know about this for now. Control Yulia and White Short Star. Wait for me to come back and ask them personally." Chapter 187. 3 months later, a bright moon rose in the sky in the southern part of the eastern continent, illuminating the entire land. In this quiet night sky, an ear-piercing shriek suddenly rang out. Then, a bright spark lit up in the clouds. The next moment, the spark turned into a fireball. The bright light instantly lit up half of the sky. It also attracted the attention of the people on the ground. They saw a military base on the ground. There were soldiers patrolling everywhere. There were densely packed armored vehicles and tanks. It looked like they were armed to the teeth. However, when the explosion occurred in the sky, everyone became nervous. The alarm of the base rang through the night sky. Whether it was tanks, armored vehicles, or armed helicopters, all the war machines were activated and roared. The soldiers loaded their magazines, turned off the safety, and looked at the sky warily. The air defense soldiers picked up rockets and aimed directly at the sky. It seemed like they were ready to shoot at any time. Cold sweat kept dripping down their foreheads. There seemed to be an inexplicable pressure shrouding all the soldiers in the base. Finally, at a position that was hard to see with the naked eye, a black shadow was quickly descending toward the center of the military base. A few shrieks rang out in the base. Then, several air defense missiles soared into the sky and shot toward the black shadow. However, before the missiles hit the target, a white light suddenly flashed in the night sky. With the black shadow as the starting point, a white light hundreds of meters long swept across the missiles. The missiles exploded in midair. A huge fireball ignited in midair, illuminating the entire military base. The black shadow that fell from the sky also revealed its true appearance under the illumination of the fire. It was a tight-fitting black combat suit. It had firm muscles, black hair, black eyes, and a cold face. The person who fell from the sky was Liamping. This time, he also rode an intercontinental missile to the military base. However, this time, the opponent already knew Li Onping's habits. So, when he saw the missile explode in midair, he was immediately alerted. However, what's the point of this? Li Onping looked at the ground under his feet that was getting closer and closer. He also looked at the soldiers on the ground who feared him, hated him, and wanted to kill him. Hundreds of rockets were fired at Li Onping, who was in midair. Facing the oncoming attacks, Li Onping dodged them all with a quick dive. After all, they were all manually aimed rockets. It was not easy to aim at a person in such a dark night, not to mention that Li Onping had taken the initiative to accelerate. With this acceleration, Li Onping landed on the ground first. With a loud bang, countless cracks appeared on the ground, and Li Onping finally stood in the center of the military base. What greeted him was naturally not a warm reception, but a metal storm made up of countless bullets. It might only take a few tenths of a second for the bullet to hit the target, but that was more than enough time for Li Onping. He took a step forward and arrived in front of Soldier. The ferocious expression on the soldier's face, the fear in his eyes, and the bullet shells jumping in the air were all vivid in his mind. Li Onping's palm slid across the soldier's throat, taking away his life. He could hear the heartbeats of the several thousand soldiers in the military base, and his psychic energy could sense the fear in each and every one of them. He could repeat his previous actions within 1 minute and let his hand slid across the throats of the several thousand soldiers, killing all of them. However, at this moment, he felt an emotion. This is really boring. In the next moment, Li Onping ended this game. Once he activated his ability, all the ordinary people within a 600-meter radius died instantly. Their souls were taken in by Li Onping's body under an irresistible suction force that came from the bottom of their hearts. Li Onping then spent another 0.5 seconds to activate his ability while circling around the entire military base. Therefore, the area within a 1-kilometer radius suddenly became silent. The battle cries from a second ago disappeared into silence in the next second. The entire military base turned into a dead zone in a second. It was only at this moment that the bullet shells of the first wave of bullets fell to the ground with their owners, making crisp, clinking sounds. Li Onping said into the earpiece, "I'm done here. How are Yin Bei and Sun Hao? Do you need my support?" Li Qian's voice came from the earpiece. "The battle over there is still ongoing. However, it seems that there is no danger at the moment. There are not many ability users in Yinxi, and their abilities are very suitable for fighting modern troops." Just as Li Onping and Li Qian were talking, a person suddenly jumped out from the ground. The dagger in his hand was like a venomous snake, stabbing toward Li Onping's crotch. At the same time, a figure also emerged from the shadows. It was close at hand and aimed a pistol at Li Onping's back. On Li Onping's left, a gust of wind blew in his face. A monster with long hair that looked like a gorilla pounced toward Li Onping at the same time. The three of them were obviously ability users, which was why their souls were not sucked away by Li Onping's ability. However, in the face of the three people's desperate attacks, Li Onping's body only shook slightly. It was such a simple shake of the body, but it was as if a hurricane had been set off around him. In the explosion of the hurricane, the two people on the ground flew out directly. When they fell to the ground, they had already stopped breathing. If their bodies were examined, they would find that their internal organs and bones had all been shaken into powder. The person under Li Onping's feet was not only shaken, but also stepped down by Li Onping. A muffled sound came from the ground. The attacker's body had been turned into a pile of meat paste and sunk more than 10 meters into the ground. After Li Onping walked a few more meters, a fountain of blood spurted out from where his feet had stepped. The series of sneak attacks and counterattacks took only a few seconds. However, during those few seconds, Li Onping did not even look at the three people. It was as if he had casually swatted a few flies that did not know what was good for them. He even kept talking to Li Qian. Li Qian did not know that just a few seconds ago, Li Onping had been attacked. Li Onping nodded. "I understand. Is there any response from the Yinxi government?" "They're still protesting. They want to strongly resist Xia's terrorist acts. They will not surrender even if they have to fight to the last man. At this point, Li Qian smiled. However, in private, they have already expressed to Wang Chong several times that they are willing to submit and completely submit to Xia's rule. However, they can't say this openly in the country. Otherwise, there is a possibility that they will be overthrown. Li Onping coldly snorted. Politicians, Li Qian continued to report. Also, Lucian wants you to hurry back. The remaining matters in Yinxi can be left to Sun Hao and the others. After all, after King Qilan's death, the southern countries no longer have any level 5 ability users. It is not worth it for you to personally move. Moreover, the emissaries sent by the League of Stars will arrive in Tianjing tomorrow. It has already been confirmed that the one who will come is an ability user named Solomon. Lu Sheng is worried that Emma alone will not be enough to oversee Tianjing. He wants you to hurry back. Understood. Li Onping nodded. Suddenly, he turned his head and looked deeply at several directions in the military base. There were a few ability users hiding there. However, they had long been dominated by fear. When Li Onping turned his gaze towards them, they couldn't help but shiver. They had already lost their courage. They had lost the ability to resist Li Onping. With a loud bang, Li Onping was already flying towards the north, bringing along a wave of air. At the same time, it also announced the end of his trip to Nanjiang this week. Ever since Li Onping returned to Tianjing from Morocco 3 months ago, the entire Xia and even the eastern continent began to experience a huge change. First, it was to inform the world of the existence of ability users. Then, it was to conduct a census of all ability users in Xia. There was also the establishment of ability user schools. This was all on the surface. In the dark, the 9 great royal clans all obeyed Li Onping's orders, and most of the ability users were integrated into them. Most of the original 9 great royal clans clan leaders had already been put under house arrest. Li Onping found a few younger and more obedient people from their clans to serve him. Relying on Li Onping's unrivaled strength, in addition to the hundreds of years of accumulated resources of the 9 great royal clans, the Xia dragonfinch truly shone with astonishing brilliance. It grew like a giant tree. More than 100,000 peripheral personnel, more than 500 main battle ability users. This force was like a terrifying monster. Under Li Onping's control, it displayed astonishing strength. All kinds of ability user organizations were swept up. Countless ability user criminals were arrested. Under Li Onping's watch, the entire Tianjing even achieved a crime rate of 0. This was because as soon as a crime occurred in Tianjing, Li Onping would hear about it. Then, he would use his superhuman speed to rush over and stop it. This was also a type of positive publicity for ability users. It made it easier for ordinary people to accept ability users. And all of this was only the beginning of Li Onping's plan. Chapter 188. The sound of a fighter jet tearing through the sky rang out in Tianjing City. Li Onping flew directly into Tianjing. Naturally, no one dared to stop him wherever he passed. There were even many ordinary citizens who cheered when they saw the airwaves in the sky. Obviously, under the packaging of professionals, Li Onping's image was not Chang Zheng's image in the eyes of ordinary people. He relied on his superpower to capture criminals, fight against evil forces, and fight against foreign enemy organizations. In fact, due to Li Onping's presence in Tianjing, there was a 0 crime rate here. He also saved many accidents, such as car accidents and fires. In addition to all the positive publicity from the media, he had become the embodiment of justice in the eyes of ordinary people. He slowed down a little and waved at the cheering crowd on the ground. Li Onping accelerated again and flew toward the imperial city. Although he did not care about the waving citizens, Li Onping would still pretend to be amiable and approachable. After all, this was part of the publicity work. Once he landed on a landing pad in the imperial city, someone led Li Onping to the changing room to change his clothes. After all, he was wearing a tight combat suit, which was not suitable for meeting the League of Stars emissary. In the changing room, Other than a few pretty maids helping Li Onping change into a suit, Xiao Shuesu was also briefly reporting on Li Onping's upcoming itinerary. Although the 9 royal families had been completely subdued by Li Onping, this kind of simple relationship obviously did not make them feel completely at ease. Although the marriage plan they proposed was rejected by Li Onping still agreed to let a few girls from the royal families stay by his side. It was not only to bond, but also to lubricate the communication between the two sides. Li Onping's agreement made some of them heave a sigh of relief. As Li Onping had a good impression of Xiao Shuesu, she was naturally sent over as one of the girls chosen. She was wearing a sapphire blue uniform today, and the lower half of her body was a short skirt and translucent black stockings. The uniform could not hide her curvaceous figure, and the stockings even highlighted her straight, long legs, making people unable to help but let their imagination run wild. At this moment, Xiao Shuesu held a stack of documents and said, "Sir, the emissaries of the League of Stars have all arrived. The leader is indeed Solomon. Lord Emma is receiving them in the side hall's conference room." Li Onping nodded. After watching the maid adjust the tie on his neck, he said, "Let's go and see this level 5 ability user from the League of Stars." The current Li Onping no longer had the pressure of the past few months. After the battle with Marok, his physical strength, 29. 5. Speed, 28. 4. Stamina, 29. 8. In the following 3 months, the 8th Research Institute had expanded by more than 10 times under the investments of the 9 great royal clans. Li Onping kept on harvesting clones every day. In addition, he went on expeditions everywhere and wiped out civilian ability user organizations such as the One Breath Sect, True God Religion, and Revival Society. His physical strength was also constantly increasing. However, it was a pity that since 1.5 months ago, his physical strength, agility, and stamina had reached 29. 9. No matter how many souls he absorbed, he could not improve any further. The human body has already reached the limit of the limit. If one wants to break through the limit, they must modify the body and break through the natural limits of the race. This is also the key to breaking through to the 5th energy level. However, even if Li Onping was temporarily unable to increase his physical strength, his combat strength was already unparalleled in the world. Although he was not sure how strong the 6th energy level Heaven Queen was, he was confident that even if he could not kill her, she would definitely not be able to defeat him. This was the conclusion that Li Onping came to after he had a deep understanding of his own strength and how strong he was. Just as he was thinking about these things, Li Onping and Xiao Shuesu had unknowingly arrived at the meeting room. They pushed open the door and saw Emma and a tall white man sitting on the left and right. Behind them were many ability users and high-ranking officials. When they saw Li Onping walk into the meeting room, all of them stood up. Li Onping waved his hand. "Take a seat. You can discuss the details. I'm just here to take a look." As he spoke, he turned his head to look at Solomon with a hint of interest in his eyes. Solomon also looked at Li Onping. He looked at this man who was currently known as the strongest person in the Eastern continent and the underground emperor of Xia. A complicated expression appeared in his eyes. He remembered what the Heavenly Empress had said to him before he left. "Solomon, the main reason you're going to Xia this time is to see Li Onping. If he is really as strong as what the outside world and Julius say, then don't get into a conflict with him. You can admit your mistake, apologize, and befriend him. Right now, our main focus is on the Lost State. After the plan is completed, we will have plenty of time to deal with him. I understand. What if Li Onping is unworthy of his name? Naturally, we will control him. However, I believe that Yulia will not lie to me. So, you should make preparations in advance. Also, Jinhai still does not know about Li Onping. He is currently trying his best to break through. Do not disturb him. For now, keep everything about Li Onping a secret from him." "I understand." However, as Solomon was slightly distracted, a palm suddenly patted him on the shoulder, causing his face to change. Li Onping suddenly appeared behind him. "Your strength is not bad. The League of Stars is indeed filled with talents. Cold sweat trickled down Solomon's back. When did this happen? How on earth did he appear behind me? Fang Xingjian's tone was calm and did not reveal any hostility. However, just by standing behind Fang Xingjian, he had already given Solomon tremendous pressure. This was especially so when Fang Xingjian had suddenly appeared behind him, causing Solomon to feel even more terrified. It was only when Fang Xingjian's hand had patted his shoulder that he had noticed Fang Xingjian. This meant that if Fang Xingjian had wanted to kill him earlier, Solomon would have already been hit. Right now, Li Onping's existence alone had already given Solomon tremendous pressure. He was like a god who had grasped everyone's lives and was using his hand to gently grab Solomon's throat. This meant that before the conversation between the two of them had even started, Li Onping was already at an absolute advantage. Unfathomable. This man is even more terrifying than the rumors say. Although Solomon's mind was filled with many thoughts, he still maintained a calm expression and did not reveal any of them. At the very least, the ordinary people present could not tell. He forced a smile and said, "Sir, you flatter me. This time around, I came to Xia under the orders of the Alliance Chief to mend old ties with the Xia and resolve some misunderstandings." Misunderstandings? Li Onping said calmly. What followed was silence. With Li Onping's silence, the people in the meeting room stopped talking. The atmosphere was so heavy that it seemed as if water could be squeezed out. Emma, who was at the side, twisted her body, as if she also felt a little uncomfortable. She exclaimed inwardly, "Li Onping seems to have gotten stronger again. How on earth did he manage to achieve such a terrifying rate of improvement?" She looked at Li Onping, revealing admiration and a hint of fear. It was a reverence toward a power that far surpassed her own. A short moment later, Li Onping finally left the spot behind Solomon. As the latter heaved a sigh of relief, he felt that his entire body had started to relax uncontrollably. This was the body's natural reaction after being tensed up for a long period of time. It was because no one's body would be able to maintain a focused state forever. I didn't expect that just facing his pressure head-on earlier would deplete so much of my energy. My body instinctively tensed up. It feels as if it's telling me, with all its might, that I must not make an enemy out of him. Damn it, why do we suddenly have an enemy like this? Just then, Li Onping spoke up once again. "If it's a misunderstanding, how do you guys intend to resolve it?" Solomon smiled and waved his hand, getting his subordinates to bring over 3 boxes. The boxes were made up of pure white jade. There were many special patterns in the jade, making it seem as if there were white clouds seething within them. Just the packaging alone already showed that they were extraordinary. Everyone in the meeting room stared at the 3 boxes in front of Solomon, trying to guess their contents. Solomon pointed to the 3 boxes and introduced, "These 3 are gifts that the Alliance Chief and I have prepared together. They're all for you, sir. Moreover, we've heard that you're going to set up an academy city in the country, specializing in nurturing ability users from the 6 great factions. The Alliance Chief admires your plan very much and plans to invest 20 billion worth of resources, as well as a specialized engineering team from the League of Stars, to help you build the Academy City together." Chapter 189. That's right. Li Onping nodded and asked, "What's inside the box?" Solomon smiled as he picked up the first jade box, slowly opening it under everyone's gazes. Even Emma couldn't help but become curious. What exactly would the League of Stars give as a gift? Inside the jade box was a test tube filled with blue liquid, continuously emitting waves of cold air. Seeing everyone's curious gazes, Solomon didn't keep them in suspense, directly opening his mouth to introduce, "This is a medicine made using a mysterious creature from the deep sea, the skret fish. This medicine is called the mysterious water by us. With its cost and production cycle, even in the League of Stars, we only have less than 3 sets in stock." Li Onping's eyes also revealed a curious expression. "The mysterious water? What use does it have?" "It can increase a human's lifespan by 50 years. and retain eternal youth. I know that with Sir's talent, reaching the 5th ability rank is only a matter of time. At that time, you'll naturally have a long lifespan. However, not everyone by Sir's side has this kind of foundation. At this time, the mysterious water's effect will be highlighted. When Solomon's words came out, everyone in the conference room turned pale with fright and then looked at the mysterious medicine in Solomon's hands with fanatical expressions. There were also some people who immediately thought of Li Onping's existence, resisting the temptation, carefully hiding the fanaticism in their eyes. 50 years of lifespan, even for a 5th-level ability user, was a huge temptation. None of them thought that the League of Stars would actually have this kind of heaven-defying medicine and actually give it to Li Onping. Li Onping's expression didn't seem to change. He picked up the mysterious water with one hand, suddenly asking Solomon, "This thing, how did you make it?" Solomon stared blankly for a moment, then said, "This, even in the League of Stars, is a very coarse secret. Forgive me for not being able to tell, sir. However, what I can say is that the formula for this mysterious water was obtained from an ancient ruin." Ancient ruin? Hearing Solomon's words, Li Onping suddenly thought of Jadeite City, that black statue of Priest Kano, also an ancient ruin belonging to the Shadow Cult. What kind of relationship did Black's race have with this kind of ancient ruin? Could it be that the ancient humans had already communicated with them? Li Onping thought, after I'm done with my domestic affairs, maybe I should take some time to make a trip to the Western continent. Black's race has always been a huge threat. When Solomon saw that Li Onping didn't say a word, he thought that Li Onping wasn't satisfied with this gift. So he picked up the second jade box and slowly opened it. The second jade box was even longer than the previous one. It was about 1.5 meters long. When he opened it, he saw a silver-white longsword. The sword was 1.2 meters long and looked very simple. There were no patterns, no scabbard, and even the blade was not unsheathed. The hilt looked just a little thicker than the blade, making it easier to grasp. Faced with this crude sword, everyone's eyes were filled with disappointment. Solomon seemed to have known that everyone would be like this and was not in a hurry at all. He introduced it to Li Onping. "Sir, this sword looks ordinary, but the key lies in its material." He suddenly asked, "Sir, according to our information, I'm afraid you don't have a suitable weapon in your hands now, right?" Li Onping nodded. "Yes, the cold weapons made with current technology can't last long in my hands." "Indeed," Solomon said, "for most level 5 ability users, ordinary weapons can't compare to their ability, but this sword, I believe it is very suitable for you, sir." As he spoke, he picked up the long sword from the jade box and handed it to Li Onping with both hands. The raw material of this sword, we call it adamantium. This metal comes from an extraterrestrial meteorite. Its characteristic is its toughness. After the first melting and molding, no matter how high or low the temperature or pressure, it is difficult to deform it again. Unfortunately, we didn't know this before, so the birth of this sword could be said to be a complete accident. Using it to make a sword is also a loss. But if this sword is used by you, I'm afraid it will be like adding wings to a tiger. Solomon carefully introduced the origin of the sword to Li Onping. When he spoke in front of Li Onping, he always had the feeling that he was dancing on the edge of a blade. It was as if his life could be extinguished by the other party at any time. This made him more and more careful. "Sturdy?" Li Onping held the hilt in one hand and the blade in the other, smiling. "I want to see how sturdy it is." Li Onping's hands shook violently, and the sword made a buzzing sound. Under tens of thousands of tons of force, the entire sword didn't change at all, but the leather shoes on Li Onping's feet cracked with a whoosh, becoming a few pieces of broken skin. "Interesting." Li Onping's face showed an interested smile. He simply kicked off the broken leather shoes and stood on the ground barefoot. "Huh." With this low shout, Li Onping's hands once again increased the strength of hundreds of thousands of tons of force acting on the left and right sides of the sword. But under this terrible pressure, the sword still didn't change at all. Li Onping's eyes couldn't help but show a trace of surprise at this time. If it was an ordinary steel bar, it would have been crushed into mud by him. But the adamantine in front of him was not affected at all. which made him even more interested. At the next moment, Li Onping planned to increase his strength again to see where the limit of this sword was. Suddenly, a shout called him back to reality. "Sir!" It was Emma's voice. Li Onping's arms stopped exerting force. He looked back and found that all the ordinary people had already fallen to the ground. Only the ability users could still stand steadily on the ground. Several cracks appeared on the wall, and there were 2 small pits under Li Onping's feet. All of this was caused by Li Onping's strength. He looked at everyone apologetically and said, "It's my negligence." Then he held the sword with one hand, casually waved it a few times, and said with satisfaction, "Not bad. I like this sword very much." Although he hadn't tested the limit of this sword, just the firmness it showed so far was enough to make Li Onping very satisfied. As a handy weapon, it was already very qualified. Hearing Li Onping's satisfaction, Solomon was also relieved and praised. "This sword in the hands of others is just scrap iron. But in the hands of Sir, its value is 100 times higher. Speaking of which, this sword still doesn't have a name. Why don't you give it one?" "No name yet." Li Onping glanced at the sword in his hand and said, "It doesn't need a name. It's a sword, so just call it sword. Open the 3rd box. I'm now curious about what else the League of Stars will give out." "Yes." Thus, Solomon picked up the 3rd box. When he opened it, a burst of milky white light shot out from the box, illuminating the entire room. Everyone who was illuminated by the light felt their minds relax, as if they had put down all of the burdens in their hearts, becoming unprecedentedly relaxed. They also became more spirited. Among everyone present, the only one who didn't feel anything was Li Onping. At the same time, Solomon's voice sounded, "This thing, we call it Spirit Gem, is something the League Master expends a large amount of energy to materialize his spiritual power in the real world, and then store it. It can restore a person's energy, relieve fatigue, and greatly increase a person's work and study efficiency. And if it's a one-time use." Speaking up to this point, Solomon kept them in suspense, pausing for a moment, and then continued. "It can allow an ordinary person, for 12 hours, to have the League Master's 5th energy level strength." When these words were said, the expressions of everyone on Xia's side in the conference room changed. Allowing an ordinary person to have the strength of a 5th energy level strength for 12 hours. Just how terrifying was this? This meant that the Queen of Heaven could create a 5th level ability user by herself, even if this 5th level ability user could only exist for 12 hours. But he could be created again and again. Li Onping's eyes also narrowed. He believed that the previous 2 gifts were definitely not the best in the League of Stars. For example, the mysterious water and the sword, the League of Stars definitely had better versions. But these 2 gifts represented goodwill, and the Spirit Gem in front of him, rather than goodwill, it was more like the League of Stars was blatantly showing off its strength. The League of Stars, led by Solomon, all revealed satisfied smiles when they saw the surprised expressions of Xia's people. But when Solomon saw Li Onping looking at him with narrowed eyes, it was as if a basin of cold water was poured on his heart, and his smile suddenly disappeared. Chapter 190. Li Onping took a deep look at Solomon and said slowly, "Solomon, when I entered the meeting room earlier, I sensed a strong hostility from you toward me." "Sir," Solomon said anxiously. Li Onping waved his hand and said, "There's no need to explain. Speaking of which, the League of Stars and I are enemies and not friends. Shang Zhenhai is also with you, right? I heard that his status in the League of Stars isn't low. Mammon and Bromon have also died in my hands. Other than wanting to reconcile with us, your purpose in coming to Tianjing this time around is also to personally verify my strength, right?" As Li Onping spoke, he walked toward the door. He looked out the door with his back facing everyone, as if he did not see the increasing amount of sweat on Solomon's forehead. "I like your 3 gifts a lot, so I'll give you a gift as well." Li Onping, who had his back facing Solomon, slowly raised his psychic chi, Black aura that ordinary people could not see was continuously emitting from the surface of Li Anping's body. In the eyes of ordinary people, Li Anping was simply standing with his back facing Solomon. However, in the eyes of all the ability users present, it was as if Li Anping had opened the gates to hell. Terrifying black psychic chi emitted from the surface of his body and slowly flowed through everyone's bodies. They felt as if they were in the Yellow Springs River, and death was close at hand. Li Anping waved his hand towards Solomon and said, "From the moment you entered, you've wanted to test my strength, right? I'll give you a chance now. Go all out and attack me. I'll allow you to go all out and attack me once. I'll stand here without dodging, and I won't pursue the matter after this." Solomon clenched his fists tightly and stared at Li Anping's back view. What's going on? What's his motive for coming here? Could it be that he wants to find out about my abilities in advance through my attacks? He wants to find an opportunity to counterattack and kill me, eliminating an enemy who is at the 5th energy level in advance. You want to use force to intimidate and warn the Alliance Master through me? A series of thoughts flashed through Solomon's mind, but he was not sure what Li Anping was thinking. Is he really so confident that he can take my attack head-on with his body without knowing what I'm capable of? Even if he has the ability to regenerate, it's still too risky. Just as Solomon was frowning and hesitating, Li Anping waved his hand at him again and said calmly, "Don't worry. Make your move. If you let go of this opportunity and return with your tail between your legs, I'm afraid you'll never be able to accept it." Finally, Solomon let out a deep breath. He looked at Li Anping with a serious expression and said, "I understand." Psyche Chi also emerged from his body. The absolute power of the 5th level gushed out violently. If it was said that Li Anping was like hell, then the current Solomon was like a brave warrior who wanted to challenge hell and knock on its gates. He focused all of his attention on Li Anping's back view. That extremely ordinary back view, which seemed to be full of flaws, was now extremely terrifying in Solomon's eyes. As if sensing that Solomon had already made up his mind, Li Anping did not rush him. He just stood there with his entire body relaxed. It was as if he really did not care about Solomon at all. As time passed by, the psyche chi on Solomon's body became increasingly turbulent. Even the ordinary people in the surroundings felt waves of uneasiness. The temperature dropped as well, and the breath he exhaled was also white vapor. However, other than the increasing amount of sweat on Solomon's forehead, he did not make any other movements. Finally, as if Solomon himself also knew that if this were to continue, he would be crushed by the increasingly heavy pressure, he let out an explosive bellow. 2 streams of white light appeared on his hands, and he shot them out toward Li Anping. Wherever the white light passed, there was a terrifying cold air. White frost visible to the naked eye began to spread throughout the entire conference room, with Solomon's feet as the center. The surface of the floor, tables, and chairs were all covered in a thick layer of frost. On the side, Emma's expression changed. She immediately activated her ability. A huge teleportation door suddenly appeared, blocking everyone from Solomon, and absorbed all of the cold air. Meanwhile, in the sky, a teleportation door appeared almost at the same time. The cold air spewed out from it immediately created countless ice shards, causing a small snowfall in the sky above the Imperial City. Just the aftermath was already so fierce. Li Anping, who was hit head-on, obviously suffered a greater threat. When Emma withdrew from the teleportation door, in everyone's eyes, half of the conference room was already covered in ice and snow. As the ultra-low temperature hit, many of the people present immediately sneezed. Their bodies could not help but shiver. Meanwhile, where Li Anping stood before, there was only a white human-shaped ice sculpture left. Good. Did we succeed? The League of Stars crowd let out an unsuppressible cheer. It was as if they were relieving the tremendous pressure that Li Anping had given them earlier. However, at the next moment, the ice sculpture slowly shattered under everyone's astonished gazes. Li Anping shook his body slightly and broke out of the ice. Then, with a shake, he got rid of all the ice shards and ice shards on his body. Solomon's expression did not change, but he let out a deep sigh in his heart. To think that it has no effect on him? Although Solomon guessed that he was not a match for Lianping, he had thought that even if his frost attack could not defeat Lianping, it should at least be able to injure him a little. However, Fang Xingzhan did not even seem to have his defenses broken, let alone being injured. Lianping's expression was calm, as if Solomon's earlier attack had not happened at all. Your ability isn't bad, but you didn't use your full power earlier, right? I heard that when you join forces with the League of Stars Night Beast and Sky Smasher, you can create an absolute death domain where no life can survive. If there's a chance, I'd like to give it a try. Solomon lowered his head and replied, "There will be a chance." Lianping smiled and did not say anything. He turned and left. "Emma, take good care of Solomon and the others. I still have something to do today, so I'll be leaving first." The few maids, Xiao Xuesu, and the others also left with Lianping. Although Lianping had only appeared for a short period of time, he had left a deep impression on everyone present. This was especially so for the people from the League of Stars. Lianping's abilities had become increasingly unfathomable in their hearts. Lianping, who had left, was also thinking about Solomon's ability. The ability to create frost and produce extremely low temperatures was actually very terrifying. If he were to take it head-on, even with his physical body, he would probably be seriously injured and have to use his ultra-rapid regeneration ability. This was no different from using his physical body to take on Zhurong's flames. Thankfully, Lianping had not taken it head-on with his physical body. Otherwise, although he would not have been seriously injured, his body would probably need to regenerate. That would not be a good sight. It would also not have been able to show his overwhelming strength. The ability that Lianping had used to resist the frost attack was one of the abilities that he had obtained from the psychic incarnation. Lianping called it the Nihility Force Field. It was an ability that could use Lianping's physical body's brute force to act on the real world in the form of a force field and distort all matter. The only condition was that the target of the force field had to be something that Lianping's physical body was in contact with. In other words, if Lianping punched out with 10 million tons of power, this power could only be released from his physical body. All of his moves originated from this. However, now this 10 million tons of power could exist in the form of a force field. When Lianping covered his entire body with a Nihility force field, he could completely ignore most of the attacks in the real world. It was by relying on the Nihility force field that Lianping was able to remain unharmed under Solomon's cold air attack. The Nihility force field was also the second ability that he had learned from his psychic incarnation in the past 3 months after he had replenished his psychic incarnation. Now that he thought about it, this might be the true use of Black's physical strength. Under the effect of the Nihility force field, the destructive power of his strength had increased by more than 10 times or even 100 times. Just when Lianping was leading a group of beautiful girls in the Imperial City, a young man suddenly rushed over and blocked Lianping's path. He waved his hand and threw a punch at Lianping's cheek. Chapter 191. The man's fist was grabbed by Lianping, and he cursed, "You scum! How long are you going to play with Yin? Let her go, or I'll splash you with my blood, even if I die." When Lianping heard this, he raised his eyebrows and looked at a tall beauty who was standing side by side with Xiao Xuesu and following behind Lianping. This woman didn't look as gorgeous and seductive as Xiao Xuesu. However, her every move gave people a feeling of nobility and elegance. The word lady was simply tailor-made for her. She was Wang Yin, the woman called Yin'er by the man. At this time, when she saw the man rush out and heard what the man said, her face turned pale and she looked nervously at Lianping. Hearing the man's words, Wang Yan's face changed and she hurriedly explained, "Sir, I have nothing to do with him. I don't know what nonsense he is talking about." After that, she walked directly to the man and said angrily, "Gout Jinwen, what do you want to do? Are you crazy to come here?" "Yin'er, Don't be afraid. Gao Jinwen took Wang Yan's small hand and said, I really love you. Nothing can separate me from you. Don't think too highly of yourself. Wang Yan pulled the other's arm away. The two of them immediately pulled at each other. But from the beginning to the end, Li Onping just didn't say a word and just watched coldly. When Wang Yan saw him like this, she was even more afraid and quickly explained, Sir, I really have nothing to do with him. It's all his wishful thinking. Xiao Shuesu frowned and whispered in Li Onping's ear, Sir, this Gao Jinwen is a collateral descendant of the Gao family. Because he has no talent and no awakening ability, he has never been valued. I heard that after he first saw Wang Yan a few years ago. He was shocked and has been chasing after her ever since. However, Wang Yan is indeed not interested in him. The two of them should have nothing to do with each other. After that, she saw Wang Yan's pitiful look, hesitated for a moment, and then said, Darren, do you want me to ask someone to take Gao Jinwen away? I promise that he will never step into Tianjing City again. When Xiao Shuesu said this, she was confident. If it was in the past, she was just a rich young lady of the Xiao family. Although she was also an ability user, she could only beat Gao Jinwen. If she wanted to chase Gao Jinwen out of Tianjing forever, she would probably need a series of methods. But now that she was Li Onping's follower, her words, in the ears of the 9 great royal families, more or less carried the same meaning as Li Onping. Once she told the old guys in the family that Li Onping hated Gao Jinwen and didn't want to see him again. In that case, being expelled from Tianjing City would be a light punishment. Find out how he got into the palace. Those who slack off will all be punished as dereliction of duty. Li Onping then waved his hand. After saying that, Li Onping slowly walked towards Gao Jinwen. Suddenly, he grabbed Gao Jinwen's head. What are you trying to do? Xiao Shuesu and the others at the side also became nervous. Li Onping couldn't really be planning to kill someone in the palace, right? Unexpectedly, Li Onping only held Gao Jinwen's skull and slowly lifted him up. I heard that on the international assassins black market, this head of mine is worth 1 billion. But I really didn't expect that there would be someone who doesn't know the difference between life and death. Hearing this, Gao Jinwen's expression changed. He said nervously, What are you talking about? I don't understand what you mean. Li Onping sneered. He pointed at his ears and said, I can hear 2 kinds of heartbeats on your body. One of them even has a very weak psychic energy. You've possessed Gao Jinwen's body and controlled him to get close to me, right? But you actually used such a stupid excuse to find me. Should I say that you're not afraid of death, or are you stupid? After Li Onping finished speaking, Xiao Shuesu and the other women retreated. The palace guards at the side surrounded Gao Jinwen. When Gao Jinwen heard Li Onping's words, the corners of his mouth curled up. Then he laughed confidently. I've been discovered, but it doesn't matter. If you want to kill me, then kill me. In any case, this is just a clone of mine possessing his body. If anyone is to die, it's this idiot who will die. Otherwise, why do you think I dare to find an excuse to find you? Seeing Li Onping frown, Gao Jinwen became even more proud. Li Onping, I know that you are very strong. But in a battle of abilities, it's not about who has more strength and speed that wins. You can't do anything about my ability. Is that so? Li Onping was non-committal. Of course. I've already said that the one on Gao Jinwen's body is just a clone. Even if you turn him into an electron, it's useless. Gao Jinwen laughed. Besides, I'm not here to assassinate you. I'm only here to meet you and see if you have the qualifications to join Divine Domain. Divine Domain? That's a pretty good name. Is it another ability user organization from the countryside? If you want to be stubborn, now's the time. Divine Domain's inheritance is much older than you think. Your Majesty King of Darkness. Seeing Li Onping's expression change slightly after hearing this name, Gao Jinwen laughed even more proudly. It's not like no one in the human world knows your identity. If you don't want to become the public enemy of humanity, then consider joining us. Otherwise, you'll only end up becoming the public enemy of humanity. No matter how strong you are, can you survive being besieged and hunted by all the humans? Li Onping said indifferently. Okay, I can join your countryside organization. Just let me be your leader. Gao Jinwen said angrily. You'll regret it. Right after Gao Jinwen said this, one of Li Onping's hands touched the back of Gao Jinwen's neck. He muttered, so it's here. You. Seeing Gao Jinwen's panicked look, Li Onping said, you want to ask how did I find you? Talking so much with you just now was just a stall for time. I can hear 2 heartbeats. Naturally, I can also hear the location of your possession. It's just that I need some time. Gao Jinwen was stunned. Only now did he realize that the few words Li Onping said to him just now seemed to be an argument out of anger. However, there was no sincerity at all. It was purely to stall for time. With that said, Li Onping's fingers instantly pierced into Gao Jinwen's neck. In the next moment, a disgusting lump of flesh the size of a thumb was pulled out by Li Onping. There were still a few fleshy feelers on the lump of flesh that were connected to Gao Jinwen's body. It was a pity that Li Onping's speed was too fast. The lump of flesh did not have time to react before it was pulled out, cutting off its connection with Gao Jinwen. It was clamped between Li Onping's 2 fingers, but it was still restless. It kept struggling as if it wanted to escape. Upon closer inspection, this lump of flesh actually had the appearance of a human. It was like a mini-human. As it struggled, it kept cursing, "Let go of me. This is just a clone of mine. Even if you kill it, you won't be able to kill me. You'll only incur my crazy revenge." Ignoring the small person's struggles and threats, Li Onping exerted force in his palm and crushed the other party into a pile of powder. The flesh and blood splattered in Li Onping's palm. The small person's voice was also cut off. Xiao Shuesu asked, "Sir, don't you need him alive?" "There's no need." Li Onping threw Gao Jinwen, who had fainted in his hands, to the palace guard at the side and replied, "Just interrogate the other one." With that said, a sonic boom rang out in the air. Li Onping had already disappeared along with a series of white air currents. On the south street outside the palace, a tramp dressed in tattered clothes was lying under the shade of a tree. The tramp, who had a leisurely look on his face, suddenly let out a miserable cry and spat out a large mouthful of blood. Damn it! This Li Onping actually dared to destroy one of my clones. Seeing that the surrounding citizens were looking at him in shock as he spat out blood, the tramp shouted angrily, "What the F***CK are you looking at? Go do whatever you're supposed to do." Seeing that the surrounding ordinary citizens were submissive and quickly left, the tramp wiped his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood on the ground. "This Li Onping, just you wait. I can't kill you, but I can take revenge on the people around you. The divine territory won't let you off." However, just as the tramp was cursing, an astonishing stream of psyche gushed out in all directions from the imperial city like a tidal wave. In an instant, it swept through everything in the surroundings. The tramp was stunned by this aura. After Li Onping's Psyche Chi received the support from the Psyche Chi incarnation, the amount of Psyche Chi had become as vast as the mountains and seas. Then, a black shadow flashed past the corner of the tramp's eyes. He turned his head in a daze. He did not know when, but Li Onping was already standing next to him. With his Psyche Chi scanning and his superhuman hearing, Li Onping was able to detect the area several tens of kilometers around him. The tramp only mumbled a few sentences to himself before he was accurately located. Then, Li Onping immediately appeared next to the tramp with the speed of teleportation. From the beginning to the end, the time taken was about 3 seconds. After the tramp sensed the Psyche Chi that Li Onping had sent out from the Imperial City, Li Onping had followed him to his side. Chapter 192. The tramp stood where he was, and it seemed like even breathing had become difficult. He looked at Li Onping, and his expression turned increasingly grim. Just then Li Onping spoke. "This body only has 1 heartbeat, and I can't sense any signs of being possessed from your body. It seems that this is your true body." The tramp's gaze flickered, and he smiled evilly. He suddenly said, "Li Onping, are you thinking of killing me?" Once you go against the divine realm, you'll run the risk of your identity being exposed. If that happens, you'll become the enemy of the entire country. You better think carefully. As the master of Xia Dragonfinch, I'm overseeing Tianjing. If I were to be disturbed by you and recklessly barge into the palace, then I wouldn't be worthy of being called the strongest in Xia. As Lianping spoke slowly, a hint of savagery flashed across the tramp's face, and a series of cracking sounds came from his body. His skin kept on splitting open, and many meatballs turned into tiny figures that bounced out in all directions. Many of them were like aberrations and blood corpses, and they bit toward Lianping's neck. However, his actions were too late. Just as the meatballs burrowed out of his body, his eyes were suddenly covered by a black shadow. The barefoot, expressionless Lianping, who was wearing a suit, was like the king of gods. He held most terrifying power in his hands as he punched toward the tramp. Boom! It was as if the tramp's body had been hit by a missile. He turned into ashes and scattered into countless pieces that shot out in all directions. Lianping's punch had the power of over 1,000,000 tons. Even a tank would be smashed into pieces, let alone a living person. However, just as the tramp turned into countless pieces that shot out in all directions, Lianping suddenly loosened his fist, then clenched it, and his 5 fingers instantly clenched together. Under the effect of the nihility force field, it was as if the surrounding air had encountered a black hole. The atmosphere gathered toward Lianping's right palm at a rate visible to the naked eye. The fragments of the tramp's body were forcefully gathered together by Lianping along with the air current. Flesh and bones were crushed together, forming a terrifying pile of flesh and blood. On the surface of the flesh, a human face vaguely appeared, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, as if it wanted to struggle out. Unfortunately, the entire mass of flesh was enveloped by the nihility force field. The immense power pressed down on him, making it impossible for him to escape. Seeing the flesh struggling violently, Lianping's right hand suddenly squeezed. The flesh let out a teeth-numbing sound, and countless streams of blood seeped out from the surface of the flesh. Lianping said slowly, "Don't worry, I have a lot to ask you." In the underground training room of the 8th Research Institute, 2 figures, one black and one gold, broke through the air at an astonishing speed. This training ground was several kilometers in size, and it was completely made up of a man-made desert. On the undulating sand dunes, the 2 figures kept on moving at high speed. In every second, the 2 of them would collide tens to hundreds of times, letting out a series of pitter-patter sounds. The strong gales formed from the collisions blew across the desert, forming sand waves that were several tens of meters tall. At the edge of the man-made desert, Sun Hao was looking at the 2 figures in the desert with his eyes wide open. The figures moving at high speed left behind many afterimages in the air, and Sun Hao was forced to move his neck and eyes at high speed as well. As he watched, he said, "The golden light is getting stronger and stronger." After transforming, his speed is already 70% of mine. 70%? Aren't you overestimating yourself? I think it's at least 90%, Yang Guang said in disdain. Sun Hao spat. "Don't think that I won't dare to hit you just because you're a cripple. Before you say that, please take a look at your metal arm first." Just as the 2 of them were in the middle of their quarrel, another loud sound came from the man-made desert, and sand waves that were several tens of meters tall swept toward the 2 of them. However, Sun Hao and Yang Guang only released their own psychic energy in the face of the overwhelming amount of sand. They were able to block all the sand that was sweeping towards them. Then they quickly ran to the center of the desert. In the middle of the training ground, the sand that had been there before had disappeared, revealing the metal floor. In a huge depression, the golden light, who had returned to his normal form, was kneeling on the ground, panting heavily. On the other side, Lianping stood there calmly, as if he was not the one who had been in the battle earlier. As the golden light panted, he asked intermittently, "How much strength did you use?" Lianping gave it some thought and said, "About 2%. Then Sun Hao and Yang Guang saw the golden light punch a faint fist mark on the metal floor, and then he left with a constipated expression. Although the golden light had been working very hard during this period of time, the gap between him and Li Onping was getting bigger and bigger, and this made him feel a little depressed. On the other hand, Sun Hao secretly laughed. Ever since the Golden Light cooperated with Yang Guang to maintain the 8th Research Institute, while Li Onping was faking his death, the upper echelons of the Xia Dragonfinch basically treated him as half a member. Today, the three of them were supposed to train together. After the 8th Research Institute received a lot of investment from the 9 royal families, many of the experimental grounds here had become the most sturdy and high-end training ground. Who knew that Li Onping seemed to have brought something for sure when to analyze today, and in the end, he came to the training ground to play with them. In fact, in the entire Xia Dragonfinch, other than Emma, they were the only ones who could fight with Li Onping. Other aptitude users such as Yin Bei, Tang Weian, and the Qin Duo had great potential, but they were not close to the melee type. On the other hand, the few of them could fight with Li Onping for a while. However, after one round, although Li Onping had tried his best to go easy on them, the three of them could only hold on for about a minute on average. Li Onping thought, if I want to reach the 5th energy level, I have to completely break away from the limitations of the human body. I wonder if going through the hellish training will be useful. I should find a chance to try. However, with my current strength, it's not easy to go through the hellish training, so I have to plan properly. Now, Li Onping thought of 3 ways to break through to the 5th energy level. The first was to figure out the psychic avatar and go to the Western continent to find Black's kin, thoroughly understand Black's ability, and then use the right medicine. The second was to rely on his immortal body to undergo the true hellish training and try to find a breakthrough between life and death. The third was to find a chance to eat the Queen of Heaven and use the huge energy of the 6th energy level to break through the barrier between the 4th and 5th energy levels. Seeing Golden Light leave, just like that, Li Onping said, I have something for you to do. Are you interested? Not interested, I want to train. Golden Light spoke the truth. After being defeated by Li Onping with pure strength and speed, he seemed to have vented all his emotions on his body. All kinds of strength, speed, and endurance training were endless. However, this kind of training was very useful. When Golden Light fought in the past, he only relied on the superiority of his ability, relying on his unlimited psychic energy to directly crush his opponent. In the past few months, he had been training every day, training his body. Both his speed and strength had greatly improved. This also caused his combat strength to greatly increase after his transformation. After all, the effect of his transformation was to increase his strength and speed by 10 times. The higher his physical fitness, the stronger the transformation effect. The Xia Dragonfinch and the other close combat ability users who often train with Golden Light felt that this kid could break through to the 4th energy level at any time. At that time, he would probably be one of the Xia Dragonfinch's top 3. After being rejected, Li Onping did not mind and continued, take a break, go home, and see your parents. Aren't they worried about you? After they knew that I became a high official in the capital without graduating from high school, they couldn't be happier. Golden Light glanced at Li Onping. What mission? Half a year ago, Scorpion invited a scientist to cooperate with the research of the 8th Research Institute. This scientist has a nephew who seems to have a deep prejudice against us. He thinks that we kidnapped his uncle. At that time, he has been secretly investigating us, and even ambushed our members who were left alone. Although there were no casualties, the impact was very bad. And just last month, among the civilian ability user organizations that we eliminated, a group of people who escaped were gathered by him, and they formed a small organization called the Avengers. I hope that you can recruit or eliminate them. Of course, you are not alone. Yanbei from the left bloodline will go with you. Originally, I could have easily eliminated them, but in the next period of time, I might be busy with a lot of things. This organization called the Avengers seems to be very powerful, so I want you to go with Yanbei and the others. How about it? Are you interested? Okay, I got it. Just then, a male voice suddenly sounded from the broadcast in the training room. General Lianping, the results of the sample analysis are out. We will wait for you in experiment number 18. Chapter 193. In a laboratory in the depths of the 8th Research Institute, a beautiful female Ph.D. student wearing a white lab coat was introducing the scene before her to Lianping. There were hundreds of test tubes in the room, and in each test tube, there was a thumb-sized red blood clot. The blood clot was in the shape of a small person, and it was constantly struggling. However, there were a few silver pliers in the test tubes that firmly clamped them. No matter what they did, they couldn't really break free. The beautiful female Ph.D. student was called Xia Lu. She was a mixed-blood girl who had come from the Western land to study in the Xia. However, under her beautiful appearance was a passionate heart toward science. Otherwise, she would not have been willing to give up all contact with the outside world and focus on her work in the Research Institute. Right now, she was looking at the several hundred test tubes in the laboratory with a fervent expression. She introduced the test tubes to Lianping, who was behind her. What an amazing ability. The experimental subject is able to split itself into over 100 weak subbodies. Each subbody has the strength of an adult and shares the main body's thoughts. What's even more amazing is that each subbody can take over the human body by lodging itself in the spine of an ordinary person. If we want to kill the experimental subject, we'll have to kill all the subbodies at the same time. Otherwise, according to our calculations, even if only one subbody is left, it'll be able to reproduce to its original number within a month. Saying this, she looked at Lianping sincerely and said, "However, I don't recommend that you kill it. There's too little time, and we haven't had the time to do many measurements and experiments. I hope that you can hand it over to me in the future. This will definitely be an important event in the history of biology." Lianping nodded and let Xiaolu leave. He looked at the little people in the test tubes and noticed that they were all glaring at him with savage expressions. Lianping smiled. "Your ability is really similar to what I thought. At the instant I attacked you, I saw that you had split into so many clones. I had a rough guess of your ability, so I changed my attack method at the last minute and brought you to the Research Institute." As he spoke, Lianping switched off the surveillance cameras in the laboratory. He knew that what the other party was going to say next could be very important. He did not know about this like other people. Can this guy still think of so many things when he attacked me? Even though he was extremely wary of Lianping, this ability user from the Divine Realm didn't completely admit defeat, still shouting through the test tube. "Lianping, the Divine Realm definitely isn't as simple as you think. Your current strength is incomplete, isn't it? Once the elders of the God Realm unite and announce your identity to the public, can you imagine the result? Moreover, there isn't any big conflict between us. Why do you have to be so overbearing from the start?" Lianping didn't say anything. He thought, he mentioned the Dark Devil earlier in that threatening context. Did he really think of me as dark? In other words, the so-called Divine Realm had a very good understanding of Black's race. They even had a way to distinguish between different races. Furthermore, it is highly likely that they have understood Black's racial ability and have found a way to restrain it. Thinking of this, Lianping had a plan. He couldn't tell the other party that he wasn't dark. If that were to happen, the other party might lie to him or even not tell him about the Divine Realm. Instead, if he were to pretend that he was, the other party would instead tell him a lot of basic information that everyone knew. Therefore, Lianping said, "Why don't I know about the existence of the Divine Realm? And why did you guys come looking for me?" It's because you're not the first demon to come to this land. Long before you came to this land, there were already demons who had found this place. Humans paid a terrible price, sacrificing about 80% of their population before they were able to completely seal that demon. However, it's also because of this that we've obtained a lot of information from that demon, and we've grasped a way to go against you guys. Although you're already very powerful now, once you start a war with the Divine Realm, the outcome is still unknown. As expected, after the other party thought of Lianping as a non-human creature, he revealed a lot of information. It was because the other party was thinking of Li Onping as a non-human. However, after knowing this, Li Onping thought for a moment and led the conversation. You're talking about the power to go against us? Are you referring to abilities? You guys aren't the only ones with such things, right? Upon hearing Li Onping's words, the person continued. In order to fight you guys, we humans have grasped powerful strength and developed abilities that are specially used to fight monsters like you. However, I'm here to confirm your identity. Secondly, I'm here to confirm how much of your abilities you've awakened. However, according to our observations, you're not a beast without any rationality. You could be a partner. I admit that the way I came to meet you was inappropriate, but I didn't hurt anyone, right? Li Onping sneered and said, "What's your name? You can call me Zombie." Following that, Li Onping walked to the laboratory's control panel and entered a few commands. One of the hundreds of test tubes was suddenly electrified. After the blood-colored avatar let out a tragic cry, it turned into charcoal. Zombie, if you don't want any more avatars to die, answer my questions honestly. Following that, under Li Onping's torture, the zombie revealed information about the divine realm bit by bit. When Li Onping walked out of the laboratory and handed the zombie to Xia Lu, the other party was completely dead. Only 100 corpses were left for her to analyze. Li Onping ignored the disappointed Xia Lu. He didn't get much information about the divine realm from the zombies' mouths. This was because the zombie's ability was very strong, but it was only an outer member of the divine realm. The so-called God's Domain, according to the zombies, was an organization that was established when humans first discovered and sealed the demons. The so-called demons were the race that Black belonged to. They had nothing to do with the demons in myths and legends. The word demon was just a name given to this creature by humans at that time. The so-called realm of the gods was the result of humans going through untold hardships to seal the demons. It was an organization established specifically to fight against the demons. However, as time passed, humans developed. The demons never appeared again. The divine realm quietly hid in the shadows of the world and never appeared in front of others. It only developed to fight against the demons that might come. However, humans were ultimately fickle creatures. As hundreds and thousands of years passed, he watched as the humans on the ground continued to have disputes. Dynasties rose and fell. Finally, the leaders of the divine realm grew ambitious, and the nature of the divine realm gradually changed. Although they were still silently accumulating strength, their goal was completely different. One could imagine how shocked they were when they discovered that Li Onping was the demon they had been waiting for a long time. However, the changes brought about by time even made them forget their original goal. That was why the zombie was sent to invite Li Onping to join. The above information was obtained by Li Onping from the zombie's mouth and deduced. However, after knowing so much, Li Onping still had many doubts. How did the humans in the past seal the so-called evil demons? The divine realm actually misunderstood my identity. And why did they invite me to join? And why did they directly send the zombie as a peripheral member? And how reliable is the information that the zombie was told by the divine realm? Li Onping was very confused about the purpose of the divine realm. However, there might be a chance to get answers to these questions. According to the zombie, if he agreed to join the divine realm, he would go to the top of the Sun Tree, the tallest building in Dongyang City, on the first day of next month. There would be people there to receive him and answer his questions. While thinking, Li Onping walked out of the institute and flew toward the palace. Now that he was in Tianjing City, he rarely relied on transportation. Wherever he wanted to go, he could just fly there. Firstly, it was fast. Secondly, some propagandists believed that Li Onping's actions could subtly make superpowers enter the lives of ordinary people. However, after flying all the way back to the palace, Li Onping heard a commotion from afar. A group of hundreds of people was holding flags and banners, demonstrating at the entrance of the palace. When they heard the sound of air breaking from the sky and saw the white airwaves left by Li Onping, they seemed to be even more excited. In particular, a few people in the lead were holding loudspeakers and shouting slogans as if they were ready to attack the palace. Chapter 194. Let those monsters get out of our lives. We don't need protection. Dictator, get out of our way. In front of the palace, a group of protesters held up banners and shouted loudly. Most of them were young people, men and women. There were more than 200 people in total, which attracted a lot of passers-by. As for the TV stations, they had already received the news. Most of them didn't have the courage to report this kind of thing. The reason why it was most of them was naturally because there was a TV station reporter with a cameraman standing behind the protesters. The cameraman said anxiously, "Brother, the leader said not to get involved in this matter. I think we should stop filming." The middle-aged reporter standing in front of him said, "What are you afraid of? Do you think the monster in the palace dares to kill us? Take it seriously. I will definitely expose his true colors. This will be the biggest news in history." The cameraman shook his head and looked at the heavily guarded palace. He raised the camera and pointed it at the reporter. "Hello, everyone. This is Focus on the World. I am Tian Haowen." In the security room, Li Onping's ears twitched. Then he pointed at Tian Haowen on the screen and said, "Who is this man? Why is there a TV station reporting?" Lu Feng said, "His name is Tian Haowen. He was originally just a third-rate host. But recently, he has been satirizing the current politics, criticizing the authorities, and..." Seeing Lu Feng pause, Li Onping frowned and said, "Attacking me?" Yes, relying on these maverick remarks in the program, he has gained a lot of supporters on the internet. Of course, there are more critics. Has he been appeased? Lu Feng replied, "It's useless. This guy doesn't listen to force or persuasion. He doesn't want money. It's useless to let his leader threaten him. I think he wants fame. He's the kind of guy who doesn't care if he dies as long as his name goes down in history." Li Onping looked at Tian Haowen, who was jumping up and down on the screen. He suddenly sneered and said, "I want to bring them heaven, but they complain that they have lost the freedom to stay in hell. Humans are truly laughable creatures." Lu Feng suddenly coughed a few times and ordered the royal guards in the security room. "All of you leave first. Don't come in without my permission." Then, with a respectful expression, he said to Li Onping, "Sir." Li Onping sighed and said, "Don't worry, I have a sense of propriety. I won't say such things in front of the public." Hearing Li Onping's answer, Lu Feng didn't say anything. As one of the executors of Li Onping's plan, he was also responsible for creating a righteous image for Li Onping. In his eyes, Li Onping was strong, cold, and rational. Under his leadership, Xia would develop to the top and even become the strongest country in the world. Therefore, he did not want Li Onping to carry any stain on his name. "Sir, do you need us?" Lu Feng made a knife hand gesture. "It's fine." Li Onping glanced at the crowd on the monitor and said, "If we act now, it will only give them an excuse to attack us. This kind of clown will never be cleaned up. However, keep an eye on him. Once he crosses the line, get rid of him." Lu Feng bowed and said, "Yes, sir." At this time, Li Qian, Momo, and the entire country's intelligence system had completed the preliminary integration. Li Onping just sat into Xia Dragonfinch's base and knew most of what was happening in the country. With so much information, it was impossible for him to use all his time to deal with it. Therefore, except for a few key people, he would check on them every day. Most of the other bits and pieces of information had been handed over to Lu Feng's intelligence personnel to analyze and organize. If it wasn't necessary, he wouldn't look at every piece of information. Just as the two of them were discussing the next arrangements, Li Onping's pupils shrank as he looked at the monitor. He quickly said, "You go back first. I have something to do and will go out for a while." "But sir," before Lu Feng could finish his words, he looked up and saw that Li Onping had disappeared. Only a gust of wind blew and the door of the security room slammed against the wall. 2 hours later, the demonstration was finally dispersed by the police. A few boys and girls who looked like university students walked onto the bus. So tiring. I didn't expect a demonstration to be so tiring. I thought it would be interesting. In the end, it was just standing there foolishly shouting slogans. Forget it, don't come next time. By the way, Anna, we're taking line 9. Do you want to go back with us? Among the boys and girls, a girl with a particularly outstanding temperament, delicate features, and a ponytail smiled and shook her head. No, I'll wait here for the bus. Oh, the boys let out a disappointed voice. The girl in front of them was their dream lover. As a goddess-level figure in the same department in the university, if it wasn't for this demonstration, they wouldn't even be able to talk to her. Looking at the boys' disappointed faces, Anna smiled and turned to leave, only leaving behind an infinitely beautiful back. Sigh, Anna is so cute. I wonder if Anna has a boyfriend. The girl on the side said sourly, she's the daughter of a rich family. You losers shouldn't think too much. Anna naturally couldn't hear what they were saying. She stood alone at the station. Pure temperament, cute appearance. She was also wearing shorts and tights. Just by standing there, she attracted the attention of many men. But she didn't seem to notice this. She just lowered her head, and no one knew what she was thinking. Just like that, she went home. When she walked in the door and turned on the light, a man's voice came into his ears. Do you hate me so much that you have to come here to demonstrate? Anna screamed. 80% of single women would react like this when they heard a strange man's voice coming from their room after returning home. But when Anna saw Li Anping sitting on the sofa, her eyes were filled with surprise. Li Anping, how did you know I live here? I saw you demonstrating at the entrance of the palace and followed you all the way here. After all, it's not good for people to see you and me. Oh. After Anna said this sentence, she suddenly didn't know what to say. She had a lot of things in her heart to say to Li Anping, but the two hadn't seen each other for a long time. Plus, Li Anping's current status was not what it used to be. She didn't know what to say. Li Anping saw Anna's hesitant look and sighed in his heart. When they were in university, Anna had some feelings for him. How could he not feel it? But at that time, the gap between their families was too big. He felt that it was destined to be fruitless, so he didn't accept it. This was one of his regrets when he was an ordinary person. As for now, why did you come to Tianjin? Li Anping asked. Oh, I got into Tianjin University's postgraduate program. Li Anping nodded, and then there was a long silence. The two familiar, yet unfamiliar people didn't know what to say for a moment. Li Anping stood up from the sofa and walked toward the door. I'm sorry for scaring you today. I just wanted to see an old classmate after seeing you in front of the palace today. I didn't mean anything else. Li Anping stuffed a note with an email address to Anna. He said, if you need my help with anything, just send me an email. After that, Li Anping walked toward the door. Today, it could be considered as the end of their fate. Seeing that Li Anping was about to leave, Anna thought that he was angry because he saw her participating in the demonstration. She hurriedly explained, I didn't go to the demonstration on purpose. I didn't know it was a demonstration before I went. I just heard that I had a chance to see you. Later, I found out that it was a demonstration against you. I wanted to leave, but Anna bit her lips and said, I really want to see you, even if it's from afar. Seeing that Li Anping's footsteps didn't change and was still walking toward the door, Anna gritted her teeth and threw caution to the wind, because she knew that after this farewell, she might never see the man in front of her again in her life. She rushed up and hugged Li Anping from behind. She said in an extremely soft voice, I missed you. Anna's speed was so fast that even an ordinary person could dodge it. But at this time, Li Anping's skill, which was enough to dodge the bullet, was useless. His footsteps became heavy, so heavy that he couldn't even avoid a girl's hug. The other party's soft voice reached his ears, but it was like lightning in the sky cutting through his mind. He wanted to push Anna away, but he felt the warmth coming from behind. A pair of arms that could tear the sky apart couldn't push away the hug of a person who loved him. Perhaps to a man, a woman's gentleness was the most powerful weapon in the world. If the person hugging him was Li Qian, Xiao Xuesu, or even Emma, he could push them away. But Anna, the Anna who liked the original Li Anping, the Anna who liked Li Anping who had nothing in the beginning. I'm sorry. After a long silence, Li Anping slowly opened his mouth. In the next second, When Anna felt her arms loosen, there was no one in front of her anymore. She couldn't help but cry. And Li Anping had already appeared on the roof of a building several hundred meters away. He looked at Anna behind the window from several hundred meters away. He saw the tears on her face fall like a kite with a broken string. He took out his phone and transferred a group of people to protect her in the future. He had too many enemies now. Although Li Anping was strong enough, he only had 100% confidence in protecting himself. Anna was just an ordinary girl. Any slight change in the environment, the aftermath of a battle between ability users, was enough to kill her. The slightest weak assassination was enough to kill her. Anna wasn't suitable for him at all. If she was with him, it would be too dangerous for Anna. He distanced himself from Anna and got people to protect her in the dark. This might be the best way for now. Perhaps after completely suppressing the League of Stars, pacifying the countries in Nanjiang, Ice Fortress, Dongyang, and other countries near the eastern continent under his rule, and the newly appeared Divine Realm, he had to deal with them. After all these threats were eliminated, the eastern continent was completely unified, and Li Anping's utopia was established. Then he could start to consider such things. At this moment, Lu Feng's call came, and his voice came from the phone. "Sir, there's an unexpected situation." Chapter 195. Although it was already past midnight, the meeting room in the palace was still crowded with people. There were all kinds of documents on the table. There were also ashtrays full of cigarette butts. Li Anping was sitting at the top of the table, looking at a document in his hand. 10 minutes later, Lu Sheng hurried into the meeting room with a laptop and a computer. Seeing everyone's doubtful eyes, he nodded heavily and said, "There's a result." With that, he put the laptop on the projector on the table, and a report about the East China Sea was displayed on the projection. Pictures and cousins were reflected in everyone's eyes. Lu Sheng said calmly, "According to the detection of the Seismological Bureau, 2 strong earthquakes occurred at the bottom of the East China Sea in succession, with magnitudes of 9 and above. What does the underwater earthquake have to do with us?" Someone asked. Lu Sheng pointed to the coastline on the projector and said, "According to the calculation and detection of the Seismological Bureau, the tsunami caused by the earthquake is hitting the eastern coastline of our country at a speed of 800 kilometers per hour. According to their prediction, the tsunami will reach a height of more than 30 meters after reaching the East China Sea. Other places are not a big problem, as they only need to take shelter in advance on the coastline. The biggest problem is Golden Harbor City on the peninsula of the East China Sea. If the tsunami hits, I'm afraid millions of square kilometers of the city will be submerged. Migration is too difficult, and the damage caused by the tsunami will be in the hundreds of millions. Then what should we do? We can't stop the tsunami, right?" Li Anping asked. "How long will it take for the tsunami to reach Golden Harbor City?" 14 hours. Instantly, everyone started whispering to each other. A man stood up and said, "Can we use explosives to blow up the tsunami? How is that possible? It's ridiculous." Another person suggested, "We can only let the citizens of Golden Harbor City evacuate in advance. Time is too tight, and we need the cooperation of the military." Lu Feng said, "Can we ask Lord Emma to use the portal? It will be a lot more efficient." "Yeah, it's fine if we use the portal. Does that mean Lady Emma can send the tsunami into the portal as well?" Li Anping shook his head. "The area is too big. It's impossible for Emma to cover 100 kilometers of coastline. Then there's no other way. Now that things have come to this, we can only hurry up and let the citizens of Golden Harbor City evacuate quickly. The time is too short. I'm afraid the ordinary people will be very resistant. There's nothing you can do even if you resist. Is your life more important than money? Let the Jingguang city government do a good job in appeasing them." Li Anping tapped the table with his finger while the group of people were discussing heatedly. The entire conference room instantly fell silent. Li Anping pointed to the coastline on the projector and said, "If it's just Golden Harbor City, I can try to stop the tsunami." When Li Anping finished speaking, the entire conference room seemed to have turned into another world. Lu Sheng swallowed a mouthful of saliva and asked again with a face full of doubt, "Sir, you said you can stop the tsunami in Golden Harbor City?" It was no wonder they were surprised. The wall of water formed by the tsunami contained enormous energy and was tens of meters high. Such a powerful wall of water would repeat every few minutes or tens of minutes, rushing forward and destroying everything on the coastline. With the development of modern technology, there was no way to stop it. Especially this time tsunami. Once it reached Golden Harbor City, its power would be enough to submerge half of the peninsula, causing hundreds of thousands of deaths. The economic and material losses would be even more difficult to calculate. I'm about 60% sure. You can continue to arrange the evacuation. I'll try it myself first. At this time, Lu Feng's mind suddenly lit up and he asked, "Sir, can you take a private plane to Golden Harbor City? Can you also take a film crew with you?" "What for?" "If possible, I hope to record the scene of you stopping the tsunami and broadcast it as news material. This will be very helpful for the policies we're implementing now. Then you can arrange it quickly." "Yes." Lu Feng quickly took out his mobile phone and began to make the arrangements. While the people in the Imperial City were busy, there were also some undercurrents surging in some places outside the Imperial City. In a corner of the Song family's courtyard, Song Chung was sitting at his desk, turning on his computer and reading the posts on the internet. He smiled from time to time. From behind him, one could see that the screen was full of posts criticizing Li Anping, especially an account named Tian Haowen, which was particularly active. His Weibo was full of posts criticizing the current rulers, especially Li Anping. Since Song Chung was put under house arrest by his family, he could only read these posts every day to comfort himself. But no matter how much he read, it couldn't erase the anger in his heart. The Song family fell and became a chess piece in Li Anping's hands. He himself was put under house arrest by the family elders because he was Song Bang's brother and had a conflict with Xia Yunin. They were afraid that he would offend Li Anping. Because of this, his future was ruined and he was like a cripple. How could he not be angry? How could he not be angry? At this moment, a woman's voice suddenly sounded behind him. "No matter how happy you are cursing on the internet, you can't hurt Li Anping in reality." "Who is it?" Song Chung turned around and saw a mysterious woman standing behind him. The woman's body and face seemed to be wrapped in a layer of fog. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see her face clearly. The woman said, "Don't bother. I use my ability. You can't see what I look like now." "Who are you? Why are you looking for me?" At this time, Song Chung calmed down. If the other party really wanted to kill him, she didn't need to talk to him at all. Since the other party spoke, she wanted to communicate. She had something for him to do. "Do you want to deal with Li Anping? I can help you." Song Chung frowned and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? If you keep talking like this, I'll call someone." The woman smiled and said, "You don't have to be afraid. Li Anping can hear what we're talking about now. After I came, I used my ability to cover the entire room. The air can't be transmitted. No matter how strong Li Anping's hearing is, he can't hear what we're talking about here." Seeing that Song Chung still didn't say anything, the woman continued, "You don't believe me? If Li Anping can really hear our conversation, with his strength, he would have appeared here long ago." Song Chung asked suspiciously, "Even if what you said is true, what help can you give me?" The woman smiled mysteriously and then pointed her finger. Song Chung felt endless light drilling into his forehead, and an unknown energy grew rapidly in his body. "What did you do to me?" When the light dissipated, Song Chung looked at his hands. Streams of energy flowed continuously in his body like air currents, and all the physical ailments he had suffered over the years had disappeared without a trace. He had never felt that at this moment his strength was so strong. I became an ability user? Don't make a fuss. I only activated your bloodline ability. Your ability level is only level 3 now." As she spoke, the woman's body turned into countless pieces and slowly disappeared into the air, leaving only a package in front of Song Chung. "After you absorb the spiritual power in this thing I left for you, it's enough to reach level 4. It's a little useful. However, it's still not enough to deal with Li Anping. So, don't make a fuss about it. Hide your strength carefully and find a chance to leave Tianjing City. When you get there, with your identity as one of the 9 royal families and your current strength, it'll be easy for you to gather a force. Then, you'll have a chance to compete with Lianping. As the woman finished speaking, her figure disappeared completely, leaving Song Chung standing alone in the study. His eyes revealed a ferocious light like that of a wild beast. In a bedroom in the hotel, Solomon from the League of Stars seemed to be waiting for something. A moment later, a breeze blew through the window, and a woman's figure appeared in the room. League leader, no need to be so polite. The woman waved her hand, and the lower half of her body was disappearing. I used the spiritual fire that I brought over to directly increase the strength of Song Chung, Li Tai, Zhang Kuang, and a few others. Although I mainly relied on the spiritual fire, this clone of mine consumed too much energy. There's not much energy left. This time, I possessed your body and came to Xia. First, I wanted to see Li Anping with my own eyes. Second, I wanted to find some people in Xia to be his opponents. Unfortunately, it looks like they're all trash. I only hope that after I help them, they can waste a little bit of Li Anping's time. Then, League Leader, what do you think of Li Anping? His strength is indeed very strong, but he's on the wrong track. He's a madman who wants to establish an utopia. One day, he'll be on the opposite side of the entire upper echelon of Xia. What we need to do now is not to make an enemy of him before that happens. Moreover, his strength is very limited, and he has too many shortcomings. The Queen of Heaven sneered. We just need to wait until I stabilize my power at level 6, and Jinhai breaks through to level 5. At that time, even if he reaches level 5, he'll definitely not be our match. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.